All right, well, let's go live here. Let's go live. Start out our day. Preparing the stream. Okay, welcome everybody. Look at that. We are setting up our meeting to go live here. Sam, give us a second, And then we will say our piece, which is, welcome everybody. Welcome everybody to Hash Church episode, oh geez, what is it, 21, episode 2.0, 21. Johnny B's in the house, already lighting up a fatty. Hemp guy's in the house trying to figure out his camera.
Yeah, I don't get it.
You can do it! Johnny's muted.
But
I came in muted.
There you go. Look at you.
There you go.
Johnny.
I had enough people in chat told me I better be on mute, so.
Oh, listen, we better walk Mr. Sam through this or he's going to talk over us, okay? We need to see his little doll. So what can we do for you, Sam? You need to figure out how to turn your camera on.
How do I turn my fucking camera on?
It's usually on the bottom left where it says mute and stop video, or it might say.
Oh, yeah, it's off.
Now remember, when you turn it on, ooh, we almost saw you there, buddy. We saw your elbow. Welcome, Etienne.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Oh, very well, in fact.
Excellent.
Very well, in fact. Oh, man, it's so different starting this up in the morning from the Google Hangouts that I have to admit, I felt a little bit of nervousness this morning, just trying to. It's crazy how fast when I send out that link, how fast you guys are in here. So I got to kind of hit the record button. And then, hey, how's it going, Debbie? No, she's got to figure it out. Maybe her mic, maybe her video. Bottom left for video and microphone, figure it out. Make sure you have live chat up, not just top chat.
We're supposed to get a link. Are we supposed to change the link in YouTube? People want to know in chat.
They're in chat right now. I see them all.
How come I'm just getting a screen?
I don't know. You're probably on the
Please, everyone, down some.
wrong one. Good morning, everyone. Let's help Debbie get her microphone working there. Bottom left.
Not working, or it is?
It is now, actually.
Hey, I'm on.
Welcome. Wow, we've been trying to get you on for a while, haven't we?
I made it. I'm happy. Thank you. Good
it.
morning. How are you guys?
Doing very well. Doing very well. We got Johnny B and Etienne and Skunkman Sam in the house so far, as well as you and myself. Put the link out to a schwack of people. So, oh, they need the link to share in the other chat. Well, why don't, if you're in here, can't you just, I'm sorry, I'm confused. Here you go.
Yeah, I'm looking on YouTube and I'm not seeing it playing.
That's because you're not looking at the right one. It doesn't play out of the one that I have to, the one I start that tells everyone there's going to be a show tomorrow. That goes through YouTube, and I used to just push a button called Google Chat, and I could go live through there, but now Zoom doesn't hook up that way. When I go live on Zoom, it starts a new YouTube box immediately, so I just put that into the link. I put it in OG Brick. I can't post it there, not blue. Oh, maybe I'll go over to the other one and post it because this shouldn't be.
Yeah, I'm in both right now.
Hey, you probably want to switch to speaker view too. It's on grid view.
I like the grid view. But I could change it. We could go to speaker view. How's it?
I have a
We
question.
posted at the exact same time. That's funny, Mark.
Sure, go ahead, Sam.
Okay, I'm using a microphone. I'm going to turn it off and see if you still hear me. Can you still hear me?
We can, yeah.
So my on and off switch on the microphone is useless. The mic works great, but it doesn't turn on and off.
Well, as long as it turns on, that's all that's important, Sam, because we need to hear you.
Yes. Well, you don't need to hear me anymore because you could just read everything I know in my bibliography.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, so what's going on in the world of cannabis this last week? Geez. I saw some funny stuff the other day. I found an account on Instagram, and at first I thought it was going to be one of these sort of trolling accounts that just trolls any aspect of legal corporate cannabis. But in fact, it wasn't at all. It was these guys had a whole bunch of information about what's the name of this company? The James E. Wagner Cultivation Corporation. And then Raven Quest, the other one. You got to check out this guy, James.
JWC.
You can't even believe the stuff that he says. It's so ridiculous. He forgot the word. I guess he doesn't use the term entourage. He uses the, he's like, well, it's about the cohort effect. You know, it's all of our cannabis is 2.5% terpenes minimum, and it's all about the cohort effect. And trying to listen to this guy talk, I was like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Sort of went in a little deeper and realized that, I mean, we all know this coming from the industry for as long as we've been here, but there are absolute frauds entering the industry who are now just going to sort of, you know, fake it till they make it, I guess. Like some of the things that you hear these people say,
Marcus, I'm really honest. So when I start my cannabis company, I'm going to call it Fraud Cannabis.
Fraud Cannabis from Skunkman Sam. Won't get you high, but hey.
No, it'll get you high. It's just everything I say about it will be a lie.
I like it. I think you should do that brand. I think we'll release it in California, and we'll see how it goes there, and we'll go from there.
It'll fit right into the market here.
Yeah, what's going on with your market? Like seriously, is it just a nightmare now? Like, is it?
It's recovering. It's recovering. You know, we took a hit. At my shop, we lost almost a fifth of our customers to the underground market. Yeah, for a whole year. But it's starting to come back now, you know, because, I mean, so many of our friends couldn't get into dispensaries or get legal licenses. So what were we supposed to say? The underground market stayed alive. That's probably the way it should be, you know, if they're going to make such restrictive regulations. And then our friends turned to the underground market to buy their cannabis. But I think part of the bounce back is, you know, the quality is really up. It's incredible. I can hardly even believe it myself. And of course, we've got all this toxic products on the market now with these vape pens and that thickener stuff giving people pneumonia. What a nightmare. So we're seeing the bounce back. We've almost got all of our clients back now. So that's good. But it took a year.
There's a cure for pneumonia. Smoke cannabis.
Yeah, better than some of those cheap vape pens, that popcorn lung and some of the other things you see going on. I mean, I saw an article the other day and they were like, it's an epidemic. And I'm like more of an epidemic than 500,000 people being killed from tobacco every year in the US, and like more of an epidemic than 3 million people being killed from alcohol related deaths. Like, I mean, sure, it's probably bad, but it's got to still be harm reduction to smoking radioactive tobacco.
Not only that, but the newest epidemic in America is the random mass killers. I mean, it used to be once a year. Now it's once a week or twice a week.
Yeah.
Well, I was talking to David Downs the other day, the guy from Leafly, the author, and he said it's that thickener that they use in the vape pens, that the thickener is giving people pneumonia. That is a side effect of the stuff. So when it's used wrong and smoked wrong, you're going to get pneumonia. So yeah, I mean, to the point of harm reduction, now that we know, hey, let's not use that stuff anymore, or maybe smarter.
This is why we started testing, for this simple fact. We wanted to know what we couldn't see. And once we started testing, we started to find all kind of unsavory, not good things. And that's one reason people were complaining, oh, your weed costs more. Well, yeah, we have to test for it. We have to pay employees. We have to do all these realities that come with, you know, staffing 60 some odd people to be here and actually deal with and handle everyone from patients to retail. So definitely we're seeing a bounce back from people because they realized that they are getting safe product, because there is a plethora of bad products out there. I'm not saying every legal product's out there bad. Look, I used to support the black market, used to be part of the black market, used to purvey some of the best stuff in the black market. So I know there's great stuff in the black market, okay? Still is, always will be. They said it was a third. It's probably closer to half now. Or, you know, the numbers are bigger than what they anticipated originally. That's just the fact of the situation. But
that's why we need to test everything.
Correct.
Especially got any CBD. I don't want it.
Exactly. Sam does not want a CBD, whereas so many people want it. And on top of that, I'm getting calls. I talk to people weekly who are asking, hey, where do I get a safe CBD product? What's a safe CBD product I could order in the middle of Texas and somewhere? And I tell everybody, buyer beware, caveat emptor. That's the reality. I have no idea what's out there. You have no idea if it's tested. Ask if it's tested. And that's what we tell people is, as much as they don't want to hear it, it's safest still in the dispensaries to purchase because it's actually tested, safe, efficacious, as well as it's been approved, as well as it has lot numbers. If there's a problem, it can actually be pulled from shelves, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas in the black market, same thing happened before 64 happened. Oh, you don't want it? Okay, we'll just take this somewhere else, which they do. And that cannabis goes somewhere else altogether. And where it goes, nobody knows. And nobody knows to ask these questions about why does this taste funny, because they're just going with the one choice their dealer has. We need legalization in every state. I'm tired of people in states where it's not legal yet who are going, I got arrested. Can I get a lawyer still? There's still a lot of fight that we have to do from, testing to a state, in states where it's not even considered legal yet. Look at Kansas, look at some of the other places in middle America where, people are wallowing while watching everybody else get successful or get sick from this cannabis. So they're watching the full caveat of reality of what we're experiencing and wondering how can they bring it to their reality.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you,
Debby.
Sam being worried about not getting CBD, it works even crazier the other way around, because I know someone who's super sensitive to THC, does not have an interest in having it in their body, purchased a CBD product, and I guess it ended up being contaminated, like vastly contaminated with THC, got super cooked. It was like, she's a mother. She told me she was about to go to her kids' play at the school and had to bring all her other kids. And it was not a good vibe. It was kind of like, we need to make sure that for people like that aren't really cannabis users, but they're now using some of the, maybe this person was just using a pure isolate and it was working really nicely for them until they got super stoned, and now they're paranoid because it's like they took an ML or whatever. It was it would be like the equivalent of us eating a strong brownie or something. She was lit for hours.
Debby, you have a poster on your wall behind you from the Hashish in Eden.
It's true. I think that's one of the originals.
You know what's funny? Me and my wife stayed there for 2 weeks in the hotel.
Of course you did.
Yeah, I found that poster out on Dead Tour one time. Some guy had made a bunch of them back in India and found him in a garage and was just selling them on Dead Tour. So I think they're like real OG from back in the day. That place was really running. Yeah.
They had a dozen different kinds of cannabis and a dozen different kinds of hashish. And all I had to do was knock on my floor and somebody would come up and deliver me what I wanted.
Even just yesterday, I was thinking, man, legalization is nice. I can get all the best flowers. There's good concentrates, but I can't get any traditional hash. And I mean, that alone is probably worth a trip to the Netherlands just to try it, or, where maybe the homeland where it's sourced.
We were there in 71, 72 when marijuana and hashish was still legal. They made it illegal a couple of years later in Nepal.
So is that place open still, or it's long gone? I think it might be gone.
Oh, it's long gone. I think it was run by a guy named Sharma, but I don't remember very well anymore. It was quite a while ago.
Resurrection, that's what I say. That's an opportunity right there. One day, when the worldwide global legalization hits.
Was that your spot, Sam?
That is it. I have a picture of my wife and me sticking our head out of the window next to the sign there.
Oh my God.
That was our hotel room.
That's incredible.
Well, there you go, people. There's a idea and concept in a legal area that you have seen in the past that somebody who's watching is like, what could I do in the world of cannabis? Well, there you go. You can go open up a hotel in one of these legal states and provide it for a nice, comfortable place for people to be. I know there's Airbnbs, but I don't really know of too many hotels at this particular junction, unless I'm incorrect.
You see the top?
There was only about 4, 5, 6 rooms in the hotel.
Check out the top of the sign, the Eden Hashish Center. What does it say right on the top? Your old and favorite joint.
I think they used a pun there.
That's awesome.
I like to think that Sam and his wife are in that picture while it was being taken, because that picture is definitely, and that's Old Freak Street. Is that what you guys called it, or is that just what this author's called it, Sam?
It was called Freak Street. There was also a Freak Street it was actually called Chicken Street in Kabul.
All right. Freak Street, Kathmandu, huh?
From when you're full of Kabul?
There's Freak Street for those of you that wanted to see the rest of Freak Street. That's so cool. Oh, some of your old photos, Sam, from like Kathmandu, and some of your old travels are, I mean, they're epic. They're literally like, you got to do a book one day. I know you hate to be photographed and you hate to be in pictures, but do it when you've like gone and passed, because people need to see those images. I feel blessed to have been.
Yeah, after I die, I will definitely make a book.
Yeah. Once you're dead, you should make a book, dude. You got to get on that. But once you're dead.
Yeah.
I'll puff to Sam being alive.
I'm puffing to that.
I'm testing the Karma Cup. So this is one of their little, I don't know, solventless number 2 here.
And what is everybody's opinion of Zoom compared to the Google, what was the other one called?
The other one was called Google Hangouts, and my opinion is that I like it. I like the option of doing like grid view versus speaker view. I like the fact that for whatever reason on this technology, us not having headphones and constantly muting each other causes less of a problem. I feel like the audio and the video is cleaner. And I kind of miss being able to post right through YouTube the way we originally did, but I figured out a way to work it. So I'm pretty stoked on it.
Bong rip.
There we go.
Bong rip, you called it, Sam.
Are you guys fucking back already?
About time.
We rode 15 hours yesterday from Edmonton up to Dawson Creek, and then we rode through the fucking Pine Pass last night at midnight. Pitch black, fucking moose everywhere. It was fucking unreal, man. What a road trip.
I love it, man. That's amazing. I can't believe you're both sitting in the room right now, because I'm like,
That's awesome.
you guys are supposed to be in Edmonton. Like, they can't.
How's
it going, guys?
How's it going?
Good.
About to say, I just saw you guys out on the road.
Yep, we went to Slayer, not Slayer. Slayer was last month. It was Iron Maiden. No, what was it? Release the Beast. What was it? Something.
Legacy of the Beast.
Legacy of the Beast.
Legacy of the Beast. That's a good name, actually.
We've never seen Maiden. Well, I've never seen Maiden before. And did you?
No.
Dude, are you guys kidding? You've never seen Iron Maiden before? That was your first concert?
Oh, we've gone to fucking every Slayer concert that's come to Canada, pretty much.
I know.
Maiden we didn't do yet. No.
Dude,
My first concert was Iron Maiden in 1984.
It wasn't that an amazing concert?
Oh.
Nice.
Yeah, I saw him for the 88 for the Power Slave. That was amazing. They put on great live shows. If you haven't got a chance,
The most amazing late show.
So what do you think, Darren? Was it worth the wait?
Hey, it was fucking awesome, man. And listen to this, you guys, okay? We're cruising around there. You know, we went to Slayer. The weed policy at Slayer was you guys go ahead and smoke wherever there's people drinking, you're allowed to fucking smoke weed too, right? So we walked in with our case of doobies and we smoked all day. Well, Maiden was inside. So we weren't allowed to smoke inside, but we were allowed our doobies. So we cruised in there and everything. We didn't get caught with them. We're looking for a place to smoke for about 2 hours. And we're just like, because of the VIP thing, you got to go at 4 o'clock before the concert starts and do all this rigmarole, right? Which is really cool and fun. And you miss the lineups to the merch and stuff. And we're sitting back looking, okay, well, where can we smoke a joint here, man? We find a spot. We go way to the top of this Rogers place. And we go to the stands because we're going to go to the nosebleed section, smoke there. But it's like this steep. It's almost fucking scary standing up there. So we're just like, okay, well, We'll go back to the seats, whatever, wait till the concert starts. And then we're sitting right in front of 2 security guards, so we can't get away with this shit. So we go to the top, we find a stairwell. Well, we didn't know the stairwell was there. We were waiting for we're going to find the escalator to go down. And then the guy's like, no, the escalator's not going down. You got to take the stairs or the elevator. So as soon as you said stairs, we were like, yes. We go to the stairwell, smoke fucking. There's no one in there. We smoked 2, 3 fucking joints right away. Went and sat down again. And then we did it. Then we did it again, but we're doing it real sneaky on the other side.
Soap you shower with?
Actually, you get much higher if you sneak it in a bathroom. That's
well, we were thinking about that too. We were going to do that, but we didn't end up doing it. We smoked in the stairwell, and when we're smoking, we're sparking up a joint. We're like, oh, shh, we can hear someone. So we're being real quiet, and then we can hear them again. Oh, we're looking around. We come around the corner, and there's 2 people doing the same thing we were doing. Looking, oh, there's someone, and we just started fucking laughing, shared the joints together, and fucking carried on to the concert, man. It was
that vibe of getting kicked out, of potentially getting kicked out when you're VIP, you got the good seats, you've traveled 10 hours or more on your motorcycle. It's like having a super nice hotel. It's like, dude, don't get us kicked out of here tonight.
That's the added risk and fun of it all, as Sam said. It gets you just a little bit higher, you know.
Well,
I only got kicked out of 1 concert, and that was because I took a portable DAT digital recorder with me. It's just pocket size, like a large Walkman. But they refused to let me in with it, and I refused to let somebody watch over it for me. So I left.
Hey, Darren.
This is what I'm thinking about the concert. You go up to the top so you can smoke weed, and then you have to come down that staircase where every step is a different size. Like one's a foot, one's 3 foot, then 2 foot. It's like you're holding onto the railing. Does that happen to anyone else? Like, can't they just make standard steps?
For serious.
No, actually, the steps were standard. You weren't.
Hey, Sam, check this out.
Oh, it's a DAT recorder.
For Mark.
Cool.
Oh, you.
Yeah, I've still got one someplace.
Tasty shows from the early 90s, anyone?
No,
I can almost hear the static and the coughing in the background.
Masters, bro, masters.
Hey, Darren.
Debby, let me show you what's on my wall.
Hey, Darren, just for shits and giggles real quick, my foxhole in the Gulf was named 22 Acacia Avenue, which is a Maiden song.
That's awesome.
What is that thing, Sam?
Oh, yeah, what's Sam showing?
It says, development of indication-specific cannabis chemovars to improve efficacy and safety. Signed Ethan Russo and Mark Lewis.
Yeah, you're gonna need to read that, buddy.
Is this the poster that was in Leiden at the International Cannabinoid Research Society?
Yeah, sure.
That is hilarious, dude.
How about that study that just came out about the cannabis flavonoid that fights pancreatic cancer, which is absolutely terminal, and they finally found something that helps it. Cannabis, that's some flavonoid in cannabis.
Well, the thing that's funny
More
about
science.
that is everybody raves about flavonoids, but if you smoke them, they're deactivated. You can't smoke flavonoids. You got to eat them orally.
They
Interesting.
degrade.
Never knew that.
Can you suspend them so they won't degrade so you can ingest them?
I don't know any way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Go
Yes.
chemist, go chemist, go chemist, go.
Yeah, so yeah, they'll degrade if you heat them up. Often, like the color that you see in a lot of cannabis extracts has to deal with flavonoids. Flavonoids are highly colored and they're very sensitive to exposure to air and oxygen. So they'll I think they're somewhat responsible for that so-called red ring of death that you often find in distillate, where you'll see the distillate that's exposed to the air often turns sort of like this reddish color. I think that there's flavonoid chemistry that's involved in that. I don't know that for sure, but they're very highly colored compounds. I'm sorry?
What you have to do, Mark, is leave the flavonoid in the resin head and, eat the whole resin head. But then the THC is not very active, so you can't win.
Yeah, well, I don't think they're orally deactivated. I mean, certainly there's a lot of flavonoids in the
They're not. You're correct.
human diet. I just don't know about their bioavailability and what prevalence you get just from like an oral consumption of cannabis.
You know who I think has done some work on this? I think NAPRO has done some work on this. I think they have a bunch of unreleased information on flavonoids.
Yeah, I mean, an interesting question for Sam: has anyone ever bred cannabis for flavonoid content?
Yes, there are people who are doing that. And I was very interested in flavonoids after we had discovered in about 2000 that the terpenes had the power to modulate and potentiate the cannabinoids. I was going to look at flavonoids next. And then Dr. Meshulam and Roger Pertry and a few others told me flavonoids, if you smoke them, are completely deactivated. So they're obviously not going to potentiate cannabis.
So does that mean raw? So you couldn't, like, say, bake them into a THC brownie or something like that, or raw?
I don't know if baking it will zap them or not. I don't know, but my gut feeling is if it'll decarboxylate, it will deactivate the flavonoids.
So
Yeah,
as fresh as possible.
I think they're thermally degraded, so I think that's the issue. So again, maybe this is an option for, juicing or things that, are just carried out at lower temperatures to isolate the extract. So long as the extract's not thermally or subjected to any heat, it shouldn't degrade the flavonoids. Now, again, I know that they're highly sensitive to air, and they oxidize and form very highly colored compounds. And so certainly just exposure to air or shelf life could be an issue with flavonoids. But I think what they turn into are actually degradation products that are also cancer-fighting compounds as well. So they're just sort of like metastable compounds that, do have somewhat of a half-life, but certainly have a lot of biological activity. And flavonoids are rich in antioxidant properties and all kinds of things like that because they're phenols, and these things react with ultraviolet light and air like antioxidants should.
Leave it in the resin head and stick it in the -20 freezer, and let me tell you, 10, 20 years later, 99% of the flavonoids are still there.
Yeah. I was contacted this week by a gentleman whose wife is going through 4-stage pancreatic cancer. And I put him in touch with that article, and he was like, well, what do I do? How do I get it now for her? And of course, I immediately shrugged because I don't.
Is the patient a cannabis user? Has the patient been a cannabis user?
She is responding to cannabis. I have her on different reissues of, she's trying the different.
No, but I mean, prior to having her diagnosis, was she using cannabis?
A casual user, barely once or twice a year at a concert or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, so this again speaks to that notion that all cannabis use is medical because, the cannabinoids, especially CBD and the like, basically act as antioxidants in the body and fight reactive oxygenated species that end up leading to mutations that cause cancer. And the great thing about cannabinoids is they're fat soluble, unlike a lot of the antioxidants in the human diet, which are water soluble. So they protect fatty tissues like the pancreas and the brain and the liver from oxidative damage.
One of the things that might really help her is to eat resin, in other words, dry sift or water sift, that has not degraded at all and is basically still THCA, because she won't get very high, but she'll get full flavonoid effects.
I wanted to welcome Wade into the room, and Josh and Kelly as well snuck in there. I had to move the thing over. It just showed like 5 or 6 of us. So welcome to you guys as well.
Hey, hi guys.
Hey, good morning. Nice to see y'all.
Hi guys. My video camera is not working today, so I'm just listening in, and I'll pop in occasionally. Thank you. Nice to see you guys.
We appreciate
morning.
you in all forms, Wade. We appreciate you in all forms.
As long as we can hear your wisdom, we're good.
There's something very soothing about Wade's voice. I think he could narrate like a lot of good shit.
He has a gentle timbre in his voice that is very reassuring and calming.
It just puts me at ease. I'm like kind of at the end of my seat kind of a guy. And when Wade starts talking, I'm a little bit like, all right.
Let Wade talk. Just let Wade talk. Shh.
Yeah. Tell the story.
Don't have much to say this morning.
Well, that's what I was going to say about Wade. That's what I was going to say about Wade. He'll speak when he has something to say. And I like that as well about you. So
I'm the other way. I'll just say anything, anytime.
Exactly.
I do want to throw out there, I love the conversation around that flavonoid and the pancreatic cancer study. And yeah, it really brings me back to cold ethanol extractions and or things that preserve the acid forms. There's a whole area in these flavonoids that likely are going to turn out to be really interesting when we get out of that thing of feeling like we have to vaporize or smoke our cannabis in order to get benefit from it.
So here's a question to the panel. What do you guys think about different cannabinoid profiles being present in the different types of trichomes? And the reason I say this is I've noticed some difference I've noticed that the differentiator between oil production and hash production comes from the bulbous head. Meaning when I do mechanical screen separation or water extraction, I can isolate the glandular trichome head mostly off the capitate stalk and the capitate sessile, but the bulbous tend to sit on that single stipe cell and really hug the leaf. They don't snap off in the water extraction process quite as easy, and they don't really even break off when you make them extremely cold with screens. And what I've noticed is that cultivars that are high in CBD give very, very little hash from mechanical screen separation and usually give a much higher, sometimes 2 times higher. So like literally 50% of the yield is in those bulbous heads. And I just want
the resin that you get from CBD has a drier feel to your hand.
Yeah, it's definitely different. But I just wonder, like, if we're ever going to go deep into what's being produced in those different types of profiles, and is it when you put the 2 together that you get this full profile that's hash, and when you put the 3 together when you make oil? Because I remember from being the bubble guy and being all into obsessive about isolating out the heads into different micron sizes and realizing that there were actually different highs and different effects present in those different size heads, because I'd seen it over and over again, that I started to tell my oil friends, listen, like, why not make some hash first? So when you make your oil, you've got like some 90 micron oil or some 73 micron oil. And the few that did it were definitely like, had the profound revelation that, yeah, that's quite different. But I just wonder if there's going to be a conversation, if we're ever going to get to a point where we can really decipher, you know, isolating those heads separately, seeing what profiles produce in those heads, and just seeing if you guys have noticed anything.
If we really want different cannabinoids, the best idea is to breed it with those particular cannabinoid synthases or terpene synthase. That's the real way to do it.
It would be a great study to do, and the fact that there's so much more testing of cannabis now, and you know, labs that are, you know, looking at different aspects of cannabinoid chemistry. It's perfectly a valid study to do. You know, what's the impact in terms of the chemical profile on screen size, and it would be a easy study to do, easy just mechanically, if you had all of the instrumentation at your access at a place that was growing multiple cultivars. You could generate lots of data doing that study real quick. It'd be a good study to do.
I think it's going to need to be studies plural. I think you'd need one on almost every, you know, macron that's available currently. And then you'd also need to look at some other macrons so you could start to reach those, so you can isolate those even smaller ones. Because as you know, they're in all different sizes and every different genetic considering its growth cycle.
I just want to say that I really appreciated the way you pronounced micron macron. I totally liked it. I dug it, and I'm gonna smoke a bowl to it. In fact, right now.
It's early, man.
Bong rip.
I wasn't even busting your ass. I was straight. Like I appreciated it.
You know, I was gonna say, like, from a patient perspective, and when I separate and I do all different. Mark, you've taught me everything from separation, from how to refine my hash, even to my dry sift and stuff like that. And I always talk about the different levels. Like, even I have that 304 screen, it's really fine. It doesn't press much, but the resin that comes from it is just by far more relaxing. And I'm always wondering if those, you know, has anybody ever tested the different micron levels? Let's say I've seen different profiles. It's not all the same profile, but just different cannabinoid levels from what I've seen.
I mean, I would point to the research of Paul Malberg in the late 70s and early 80s from University of Indiana, Bloomington, who had a Schedule I license and did a lot of his testing just on hemp, but did do some testing to basically his publication. He's got like 12 publications in a period of about 10 years on, you know, the generation of cannabinoids in the trichome. And he did, you know, these micro pipetting experiments where he actually went in underneath a microscope and sucked the fluid right out of the trichome and analyzed that by GC. You know, this is back in like the late 70s and early 80s.
I went and visited his lab at Bloomington, Indiana, at the university there. And that's also where Rob Clark went.
Yep.
He was working under Malberg's license.
So Mark, going further off of just even the macrons, then even just taking that microns, taking each individual one, and then vaporizing it at different temperatures too, to also see the different variables that come off of each, you know.
The one that I'm most interested in is the difference between the capitate sessile and stalk versus
what he found is that there's the what I think I'm redoing this off memory, so if I don't get this right, just look up his papers, but there's these cells that are called the stipe cells, which is kind of like the transition cells between the stalk and the bulbous head, right? So it's like right where the junction of that gland is. It's stipe cells. And I think they identified that as being the area that's basically making cannabinoids, which are then excreted into these things called plastids, which are these things that migrate toward the edge of the membrane and create the oil on the plant. So I think, if I remember correctly, and this is all from memory, so don't get me on this, but if you're getting the plant at the right period of time, you're getting it as that cycle is completed, such that the biosynthetic pathway that's leading to both the terpenes and the cannabinoid biosynthesis has kind of like completed its shuttle of all of these compounds from those stipe cells into this, what's called secretory cavity, I believe it's called. And there's just a bunch of these little vessels that basically have the oil that are like ready to burst or ready to migrate to the surface of the membrane to release it, you know, to the extracellular world. So it's fascinating stuff. He did some incredible work. He really, really did. Paul Malberg. That's Mahlberg.
Maybe we can put his paper in the Hash Church forum on Facebook.
They were also all done by his graduate student, I think, from Korea. I think his name was Soon Young, or so, I forget. But he worked on all those papers with Dr. Malberg.
I also want to mention how awesome I think that it was, of course, and standard when, you know, Mark mentions this paper from like decades ago, that your reply, Sam, is, yeah, I went to his lab. Yeah, I was there. I just love it.
Yeah, he was a contemporary. They were contemporaries. They were doing this work at the same time. And the beautiful thing is, again, I think he obviously had to have NIDA funding. And I believe his material did come from El Sole's operation down in University of Mississippi.
Well,
So
he also had Carl Hillig working for him, who did some of the first taxonomy papers using DNA materials. And he was growing seeds I sent him legally from the Netherlands to Dr. Malberg's lab because Dr. Malberg had a DEA importation license.
Yeah, if you look at the way that cannabis has evolved, cannabis has evolved to produce terpenes, terpenoids, and cannabinoids throughout its life cycle, but it expresses the terpenes at different points, terpenes, terpenoids, and cannabinoids at different parts of its life cycle and throughout its plant. So when you look at even at vegetating plants, they're going to contain primarily the sisal stalk trichromes, which are the hairs without the bulbous trichromes at the head. Those sisal stalks contain primarily monoterpenes that scientists are kind of believing are exhibiting a anti-insecticidal and antifungal bacterial role. But in order to actually synthesize the precursors into the cannabinoids, because those cannabinoids exhibit a antibacterial, fungal, and microbial properties, they have to be produced in specialized cells, the glandular trichromes. So what you'll actually see is that in vegetative stalk and primarily sisal stalk, you're going to have those mono and diterpenoids. Whereas when you start getting into the bulbous stalk and the glandular trichromes on the sisal stalk, bulbous egg trichromes and sisal stalk glandular trichromes, those are going to be the ones that are actually exudating the two precursors that are then synthesized into the cannabinoids. Now, we know that there has been some studies produced recently that are showing tricyclic terpenoids even being produced in the roots. And one of the more things I've learned more recently is a lot of the precursor terpenoids are translocated through symbiotic relationships in the roots, in the root zones, through symbiotic relationships with microbiome in the soil. That means the soil microbiology, the fungi, which are bringing nutrients to the roots, and then the bacteria are both trading terpenes in exchange for sugar from the roots, because obviously fungi don't produce sugars. Sugars are produced by photosynthesis. So the plant will actually exudate sugar into its root zone in exchange for minerals as well as nutrients that are traded symbiotically between bacteria and the cannabis roots. So as the cannabis absorbs those minerals and transfers them up the stem, some of those trichromes are going to get exudated into the sisal stalk, the non-glandular trichromes. But it isn't until the trichromes exude the THC-A synthase or CBD-A synthase in the glandular trichrome that you actually get that conversion from the precursor monoterpenoids into the di or triterpenoid cannabinoids.
And I remember the name of the student of Dr. Malberg. It was Ensu Kim.
I just want to drop the mic for Mike, because that was really, really well put, and I loved listening to that. And it really was a beautiful scientific explanation of why a cannabis plant seems to, for a fact, express itself so much more abundantly when it's got that living soil that it's growing out of, when it's got that entire living, bacteria, fungus, all of those things working together to, like you say, trade terpenes in exchange for sugars. I just, that was a really beautiful picture you painted there, man. I appreciated that. And I also, go ahead, Etienne.
You succinctly broke it down, very eloquently, actually, because people wonder the difference and always ask, well, what's the difference between soil and hydroponics? Well, right there alone is an understanding on why the uptake and what you're looking at scientifically at the end.
So someone should write down at 42 minutes, Mike West came in and started to drop the knowledge. I appreciate you, Mike. I also,
it's good hash church, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Yeah. Boom.
Using a lot of hash water on our plants that are about 3 to 4 weeks into flower right now, and trading that terpene-rich water and those waxes and those water-soluble terps and enzymes that come off of the trichome and go into the water, and then we spin it with like what do you call it? The plaster, like on a drill, we use that in the water just to agitate just the water, and then we gravity feed it into our greenhouses. And I know that goes into the soil food web, and I trust that the microbiology knows what to do, that the plant knows what to do. It can take the raw material from the plant before and synthesize those compounds back into. It don't want them.
It don't want them. It wants sugar that it can trade for the terpenes and for the cannabinoids.
It's microbiology.
And here's the thing: the plant's going to produce sugar and exudate that sugar into the soil, but humans culturing cannabis can actually contribute to that soil microbiome. There's things, fresh plant juices or fermented plant juices. Right now is actually a wonderful time for everybody who's watching Hash Church. If they have fruits or berries in their local environment, they can actually press those plant juices. We may not have time to ferment them, but obviously pressing a plant juice, incorporating that into your compost tea or into your watering schedule. For example, if you add blueberry juice to a compost tea that's brewing today and water it into your plants tomorrow, that may add some of those blueberry terpenes to the soil that the soil microbiome is going to absorb, potentially translocate. The microbacteria will likely use the sugar.
No. It'll consume it and turn it into CO2 before it even gets into the plant. Those terpenes in soil, I don't think they have much of a half-life. If the bacteria is right, that bacteria will consume those terpenes. You're just feeding the bacteria in the soil by putting that organic matter in there. Now you're translocating terpenes into the plant. Plant doesn't have any problem making terpenes. It makes its own terpenes, right? You don't need to move terpenes in.
It's not that you're taking terpenes from the plant and sticking it straight into the root and getting terpenes out of it. That's not what we're implying. What we're implying is
you're feeding the soil.
We're feeding the soil food web. The intelligence of the microbiome and the microflora within the soil knows what to do. It exchanges the information with the plant, and then the plant says, "Oh, I have nutrients and hormones to work with," and that's where you just trust in evolution.
And I just wanted to add really quickly to what Mike was saying. We've been doing fruit ferments, for 20 years plus, because it's always the right time. And when the apples are ripe or the plums are ripe on our property, that's when we'll start to do ferments. And I just want to tell people at home that it's really important that when you're working with fruit and fruit juices, it can turn to alcohol incredibly quickly, especially with your fall fruit, because you've got a lot of wild yeast on the outer coating of that fruit. So it will change very quickly. So we always tell people that if you're going to be doing any type of a fruit ferment, that it's really just for a couple of days, and make sure that you're testing it and really looking at it. So it just turns to alcohol super quickly, and that will definitely kill a lot of the microbiology in your soil.
St. Bernard's observation booth, who is seems to be a smart fellow in the chat room, is agreeing with Mark. He's saying it's the microbial metabolites that the plant uptakes is what will increase terpenes. But who knows? Maybe we'll learn something new about cannabis with the way it operates and works. I don't pretend to think that we know everything. I'm sure that we think we do, but there's always breakthroughs. Every 10 years, seemingly, there's some sort of a new breakthrough where we understand a new mechanism.
I don't want to put words in Mark's mouth, but what I think he was saying was that if you put terpenes in the soil and they're uptaken by the roots, that's not going to make more terpenes in the resin.
No, but by providing the precursors, which are oftentimes degradates of what you feed to the roots, and by providing more of those nutrients that can be absorbed, be symbiotically traded for sugar with the roots, you're essentially increasing the fertility of the soil, which then increases the bioavailability of those nutrients to the roots.
I think all you're doing is you're feeding the nitrogen fixating bacteria that the plant relies on, because plant doesn't fix nitrogen, right? And so the bacteria and the microbe and the biome in the soil is sort of symbiotic with the plant. And so in order to get soluble nitrogen, to make the DNA and the protein and the enzymes that actually do all those eighths, you know, the synthases, those are all proteins, and those proteins all need nitrogen, and it needs to be soluble nitrogen. And so I think it's just, I mean, like you guys have already talked about many times, feeding the soil and the symbiotic relationship that the soil has with the plant has a lot to do.
I don't know if you remember, Mark, but in the 60s, people used to hang their plants upside down when they dried them, because they thought all of the THC would come from the roots and drip down into the flowers.
That was still believed into the 90s for people there, Sam. So it's still
yes, I guess some people, yes.
Well,
yeah, and the roots don't produce THC; they produce tricyclic terpenes and bicyclic terpenes.
I was just at a Amish tobacco farm last week, and there's some truth to that in tobacco drying, apparently, is that, they do hang the leaves upside down, and you start to actually see a collection of oil kind of as the plant dries and shrivels up of tobacco oil, I guess, or exudate or whatever the hell it is, toxic shit. And boy, I tell you what, I've never been to a tobacco farm before. It is intoxicating when you walk up to one of those drying barns that's just chock filled with tobacco. I mean,
and that's cultivated bred tobacco. If you grow the medicinal Indian varieties that they used to smoke before white men came, let me tell you something. If you even touch the plant, there's so much resin on those tobacco plants. You have no conception.
You know, in herbology, whenever you're drying or you're working with herbal remedies, you're always drying it upside down because of those oils. And then at the very end of the plant is where, a lot of the medicinal values are of that particular plant, which is where it's going to dry out slower. It's going to have a slower dry, which makes, a lot of herbal plants, more medicinal.
And harvesting them at dawn, is the most medicinal time to harvest your herbs with the highest terpene content.
And also, I was just wanting to talk a little bit about the living soil. I think that people who are cultivating in deep living soil, we are preparing and creating cannabinoids that we don't even know about yet. Of course, there's an incredible relationship that goes on within the rhizosphere that's giving the medicinal values within the trichomes of the plant. And when you have a beautiful soil, then you're giving ultimate potential to that particular varietal or that particular chemovar. So I think that putting in its most natural environment with the best food possible for the proper microbiology, then you're definitely going to get the ultimate potential that you can out of that strain.
And, it's really hard to tell, but we were showing some of these hemp varietals that we're growing this year, and they're just unbelievably filled with trichomes. And we're really excited to see what's going to happen this year with the testing. And the trichomes are going all the way out to the leaves. And
Does that look like a cartoon filter from like an app to anyone else? Because it looks super trippy when you hold that up. You can tell it's frosty, but it looks like a trippy filter to me.
Yeah, right now, in the way that we're breeding our hemp and the way that we've been upping the CBD values and a lot of the breeding here, we can't actually tell the difference at all now after working with it for so long between our THC varietals. Our hemp varietals and our high CBD varietals are starting to create way more, smells. The terpenes coming out of the greenhouses are just really phenomenal. So
are they hybrids between drug varieties and CBD hemp varieties? Is that
we
what
have
they are?
both. We have both on the property. We have hemp varieties that we've collected from Colorado and Oregon that are open to breed, and we've been breeding with those.
Because if you analyze hemp varieties, they have a whole different suite of terpenes than marijuana drug varieties have.
Yeah, we've just been doing quite a bit of testing, and we're really noticing full spectrum terpenes. Really, a whole bunch of them are present. Whatever Anandia Labs is testing for, you know, all of them but a couple are not present. So, you know, they're all there, which is really exciting. So, and we're really being able to tell that. So we're mixing the drug cultivars with the CBD cultivars as well as CBD with CBD. And I think that we're having a lot of success in both of them, but incredible yields, and the trichomes are just huge this year.
I mean, we have everything from Spectrum, Number 5, Box, Auto, Cherry Wines. We have Ringo's Gift, Harlessus, Ringo Harlessus,
ACDC,
Abacus, our Healer strain, which is a 1-to-1 ACDC to drug to 840, which is ours. A Temple Spice, which is a THC variety that got a lot of CBD in it recently in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and we're definitely noticing that a lot of our high THC varietals, as we're working with them, is starting to show more full spectrum cannabinoids. Our CBD production is absolutely going up, even in cultivars that weren't showing CBD before are showing CBD. And I believe that this is part of, you know, living soil and the relationship within that rhizosphere that brings out the ultimate potential that I was talking about before.
And I'd like to give you skunk number 1 to grow because it has a non-functional CBD synthase. So it can't.
Interesting. Yeah.
I read it that way on purpose.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, that's what I love about the cannabis plant. It's like fractal medicine. You know, it just comes out whatever. You know, it doesn't have.
How many terpenes do you get in your analysis? Because I've never tested for more than about 75.
Yeah,
only
well, that's
36.
and obviously that's
we're only able to test for 36 right now, and we're showing pretty much about 34 being present in a lot of our varietals.
Yeah, because there's 150 that are known so far.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, and it's just we don't have access to that type of testing. And, you know, the more that we're learning and more scientific knowledge and money is being dumped into cannabis, then people who are home growers even and people that are really trying to up their breeding program will have more access to be able to get better.
I mean, any grower would want, you know, the best test that they could get. And isn't it not an issue that all labs test a little bit differently? I mean, can we speak to that? Like, how do we get all labs to create similar data? You know?
Standardization.
Yeah, the issue with lab variation comes from because when you look at the way that labs run their equipment, they have to perform an extraction on their equipment to make it into a soluble form that they send through the machine. Not all extractions are done the same way. Secondarily, the way that they run their analytical equipment is not using the same standardized formula. And then obviously there are standardized samples that you can get from Cerulean or standards, but not every lab, you know, quantifies those standards the same way. So, you know, if you run a GC or HPLC on a method that takes 5 minutes to run or 10 minutes to run or an hour to run, you're going to have much better resolution on the longer runs, but it obviously has a larger cost to run it for an hour versus 5.
And any lab that's testing wants the 5-minute run because they can run more customers through their machine.
Yeah, and that's what we see in the recreational markets is, you know, they're going to try and run as short of a lab as possible to get as to get as accurate as possible, but still be within a, you know, acceptable margin of error. And then as long as the consumers aren't complaining, they're not gonna retest.
When I calibrated my machine, it would show around the 6-minute mark to about the 8-minute mark, all the different cannabinoids over that period. And same thing with the GC that Paul used to run too.
But then they're also supposed to calibrate that machine after each test as well. Okay. so that you're supposed to, at least when I was originally doing it and actually working on the testing here in the US. But prior to everything, I always showed a calibrated machine before the test was even done. Okay, so this is
With how many standards?
1,500.
Well, because when you do your calibration curve,
right?
If you run it once with one standard serial dilution of a standardized sample, that's going to give you a good standard. But if you run it at 6 different dilutions, your standard.
Yeah, you don't need to run that between every standard. You need to basically, ISO certified labs that do this in the non-cannabis industries basically have to do that calibration maybe quarterly or maybe 3 times a year. And
I'm just saying
as, again, if you're using a standardized method where you're talking about measuring cannabinoid concentration, yeah, you're going to be probably looking at anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes per test. And you have to do it in a way that, again, just is reproducible from lab to lab to lab to lab. And, there's a lot of sort of hyping numbers in the testing industry to make sellable flowers in new markets because, it seems as though I can't imagine cannabis flower being greater than 30% in THC, but I see it all the time. All the time from labs that are basically certified or running, equipment. These are the labs that sell product in places like yours, ATN. So, I mean, the point is that, yeah, do we need standardized testing methods? Absolutely. But part of what hinders that is the whole Schedule 1 thing, because some of these companies are even still scared to sell, the equipment that's required. But the companies that have sold, like Shimadzu and other companies that basically customize their equipment to do cannabinoid analysis, you can basically get an HPLC for, on the order of about $50,000 US that can basically measure cannabinoid concentration to the degree that the industry needs to by a standardized method. I believe even their analyzer has internal standards already built into the machine. Don't quote me on that, but I think you have to still get the standards, every quarter and just do a calibration curve.
Same thing with terpenes. You run it through a GCMS.
Yeah.
And
terpenes,
you do it once and then you've got it.
Yeah,
okay.
And then your GCMS is also going to give you a way of determining whether there's trace other things like solvents or other, because the GCMS is a lot more sensitive, and it could basically sniff cocaine off of a dollar bill that's in anyone's pocket. So it's a very, very sensitive technique for, basically determining trace amounts of contaminants that could be in there. But again, now you're talking about a piece of instrumentation that runs, north of about $150,000, and you really need to have a trained, chemist or scientist to basically operate this because it's not a trivial piece of instrumentation.
All right, to clarify, gentlemen, what I was talking about with the testing in between is when we're coming up with the actual standardization. I'm not saying what was there, and to clarify further, I was going to say it's falling now more on human error, and depending on who's working in the lab currently now more so than anything, which is because we've seen also an exponential. It was one thing when I was working one-on-one with a lab. Now you're talking about 3,000 samples coming in, and they're being absolutely overrun, and then trying to find, qualified people to do everything from pipetting to, getting everything up and running happens to be the biggest problem, because I'm having people complaining and saying they're failing because the calibration or the cleaning machinery's off-gassing is actually on the actual test.
Well, you bring up a good point, and a lot of the error that's introduced into these measurements is the actual sample handling itself, where not only it runs the risk of having contamination, but there's just so many places where error can happen, not just the mixing up of samples if you're running hundreds of samples a day in these labs, but just the notion that, again, there's a systemic error in the SOP itself, where you're constantly getting either a high or a low result because of the way the sample is weighed, the way the sample is prepared. As Mike was saying, cannabis isn't soluble, so if you're sending in flower, it has to be dissolved. So if you're doing a weight determination for how much percent of THC is in the sample, that's a weight determination. So you have to weigh material. It means you have to have somebody who's competent that's able to use an analytical balance and weigh down to the 0.1 milligrams. I mean, that's not just anybody.
And a proper representative sample as well. How do you get a proper representative sample?
That's what I was just going to say. What if the customer gives you a little bud for testing, but he does?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I mean, just by analogy, we're kind of going through this in Pennsylvania now with hemp. And so what the state requires is a sample of the hemp to basically certify it's below 0.3% THC. And they don't care, and there's nothing in the regulation that says when or where you take that sample from. So here we are, probably like a month before harvest, and we're basically just clipping leaves off the plant and saying, okay, state, here's your test result. You bring up a really good point, which is the sampling and how do you use a certificate of analysis and a laboratory result, regardless of how precise that result can be. How do you use that result to characterize a bulk sample of cannabis or hemp or whatever? And so I'll point to the Oregon folks seem to really think this thing out pretty well. I think the Oregon reg is the one that I've read the California one. I've looked at a couple of the other ones in other states. Seems like the Oregon folks give this a lot of good thought on how to basically statistically represent a large bulk sample of medical cannabis, how many samples, individual samples, and how, like if you're looking at like a 5-gallon pail or a bin or whatever you're storing your cannabis, they actually talked about dividing it up in sectors and taking a sample from each sector and going lower in the barrel. And, I don't know who's got the time to stack their barrels with, high testing cannabis on the top, low on the bottom. I've heard people who spray the tops of their barrels or whatever with distillate. So when the testing labs come in, they can try to get a higher test result because, boy, that'll make it through the marketplace quicker because it tests higher for some reason. Again, the consumer who walks into the regulated market who feels that, again, I'm in a dispensary, so I'm already paying top dollar. I'm going to make a choice based on THC content when I make my purchase. So the test results have a lot to do with what moves off the shelves. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here. But to go back to the original question, and then I'll shut up, which is that we do need a standard set of tests. But I would say that, again, if you got either the Shimadzu cannabis analyzer or any current form of HPLC that's going to require, again, calibration, as long as you stick to the SOPs for cannabinoid separations, there's really good analytical methods to give you baseline separation of all the major cannabinoids. And so with that type of testing available, I'm sure that this will be something that won't be something that will be unknown in the future. People will be able to have access to these results. There will be testing. There's companies that take out-of-state samples now. That's a new thing because with the hemp industry opening up, it was difficult. Say if you weren't in California where SC Labs is, how do you get a sample tested at SC Labs? Now there is mechanisms to send state or samples across state lines. So it's becoming a hell of a lot better, I tell you what. It really is.
Yeah, so this is Pastor. Let's try and look at how we can set the example. What I guess CBD extractors or hash extractors can look for. I know that when I've built my labs or especially the labs in Oregon for CBD, we were sourcing biomass from various farms in and around our region, trying to minimize the distance from the farms that we had to ship it. But we would always, obviously the farmers had to test it before it could be sold to the processors to certify that it was under 0.3. The minute we started processing it, in Oregon, for example, Oregon passed a rule in their administrative rules committee that allowed for the product to be sold after it tests below 0.3% THC. So when the processor processes it, it may go above 0.3% THC. As long as you have a COA, independent third-party analytical test result, that certifies it below 0.3% THC, that's with that COA, you can then sell the lot that's
Yep, that's right. And you know, here's the interesting scenario. Now that there's interstate commerce, thanks to the Farm Bill, you know, when those tractor trailers or, you know, train cars get pulled over, how do they know? They're based on some piece of paper, but boy, that stuff still smells like cannabis back there. And you're looking at a huge tractor trailer that's just full of hemp, you know, pulled over on the roadside of I-95 in between Philadelphia and New York City. It's just going to be really interesting to see about the transport and how this is kept distinguished from medical cannabis.
Pennsylvania is going to figure out how to get its tax out of it. No, for sure.
Oh, but, yeah. You know, there's no question about that.
It's going to have to be. It's going to have to be detained. It's going to have to be tested, and it's going to have to find a lab to actually test it. So, you know, the reality is this time is going to have to happen, and it's going to be a long, slow process, and somebody's going to be the test case, and it's going to be a very expensive and a very sleepless night situation for those people. But that's the reality.
Those test cases are already ongoing. There's been truckloads seized in Oklahoma. There's been truckloads seized in southern Idaho.
No, but it's going to have to be in between in each individual state until we have an actual federal law, right? Because as you know, something passing through Oklahoma or Kansas is going to be different compared to like Texas. Sometimes I will watch live PD and watch these cops now struggle because it's a CBD pen. We have to actually field test that. Well, you and I know also those field tests will fail, you know, saliva even, you know, they're just terrible tests. And, you know, we're watching actual officers right now struggling with that because Texas has a law that allows for CBD but no THC whatsoever. So you can still go to jail and watch this girl get arrested for actually having THC in her pen. So she was actually arrested and thrown in the pen, where the cops are just like, you know, so it's still a conundrum even in these states, depending on the access of the legal as well as.
I think Texas is medical CBD. They don't even allow CBD for hemp.
Oh, no gas station CBD there, because there's gas station CBD everywhere else. You know.
Did you see ICM came out with a study that 14% of Americans are using a CBD product?
Yeah, and it's great.
I mean,
that's critical. I mean, it's the healing of the nations, right? It's if anything, it's going to open up the doors. I mean, I was surprised when I saw CBD in Kansas, but Kansas has a state program allowing CBD, and within a month of Kansas allowing commercial CBD, there was CBD being sold in gas stations, and we're going to see that across.
Excuse me. Okay, I'll say.
Go ahead.
Mark, are you familiar with the paper by Mark Lewis from NAPRO? I think it's called Development and Validation of a Robust Analytical. Have you seen that paper?
Is that the Geezy paper? Isn't Geezy an author on that?
Yes.
Yeah. Ryan sent me that, right? We talked about Chimera sent me that.
Very good method.
Oh no, that's a superb method, and also Justin Fishadek. I don't know where Justin is. Justin's at one of the testing labs.
Justin's across the street from me over here at IAS, the original lab I worked with.
Justin published a great paper on correlations between different varieties and terpene profiles. He's published a couple with Jeff Raber. Yeah, I mean, there's a few good methods that are out there.
I've been to the NAPRO lab in Sacramento, and it's the best lab I ever saw working with cannabis. And I've been to Dr. Brenneisen. I've been to Dr. El Sole's. I've been to all of the top labs, and I thought they were the best.
Yeah, I mean, the way that these GCMSs work, see, we used to use GCFID. FID is just an acronym for flame ionization detection. And so the way GC works is it separates mixtures of compounds based on their different boiling points and different, temperatures at which they boil. And so the most volatile ones kind of come through the column first, and the higher boiling ones come through the column later. And what the FID was just a sniffer at the end of the column that just smelled a compound coming out. It would burn it, and the intensity of the flame was correlated to the peak height, because the more intense the flame was, the more compound was coming out, so the higher the peak would be. So mass spec, what you're doing is you're putting that column now into a mass spectrometer, which fragments the molecule and creates what's called a mass spectrum. So it's how the molecule shatters when it breaks. And so each molecule has a different pattern. Each terpene, each cannabinoid, the way that they shatter creates a different mass spectrum. And so those are included in a library of compounds that's maintained by NIST, the National Institutes for Standards and shit like that. And so these libraries are all inside the software of this instrumentation. And so when they're looking at all these compounds coming out, they're able to identify down to a gnat's eyebrow everything that's in the these mixtures. And this is just routine analytical chemistry that just has been happening in the food and non-cannabis industries for years, in the chemical industry, pharmaceutical industry. So it's great that these instruments have now been applied to looking at these terpene profiles. And so the point is, Sam, is that the paper that you're recommending was actually carried out, I think, by FID, right? I think that was a GCFID method, but you can easily.
Well, I know in their lab they had.
They had mass spec, yeah. So you can easily. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't remember exactly the paper.
So you can easily apply that method, which just uses flame ionization detection, to mass spec detection. It's just a different kind of detector, The detector,
of course, is once you run a set of analytical samples, then if you didn't have it in your library already, now you've got it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like that, yeah. In fact, with the hydrogenated cannabinoids, that's how we knew we had something new. There was nothing in the library. They were like, oh my God, there's nothing in the library. Well, there's something in the library now that we've made it, But it becomes, a great detective identification tool to identify whatever's in a mixture or an extract or a formulated product.
Yeah, then you don't need analytical standards anymore.
Well, it's not like you don't need analytical standards. So the analytical standards, what those are used, and this is what Mike was talking about earlier, is to develop
calibrating the machine.
Yeah, to develop a calibration curve. So you want to understand. So when you get one of these chromatograms, you get a bunch of peaks, right, which look like a mountain range. And what you want to be able to do is correlate the peak area underneath the peak to the concentration of the compound that gives rise to that peak. And the way you do that is you run that test on that pure analytical sample at different concentrations, and you plot on one axis the concentration and you plot the absorbance on the other, and you generate a line, which is in optical spectroscopy is referred to as Beer's law. So Beer's law is the law that the darker a solution is, the more there is of that analyte in the solution. Absorbance is directly proportional to the concentration of whatever you're measuring. And so those calibration curves, it's very important. And again, this speaks to how we get consistent methods throughout the cannabis industry, is that the labs who are doing the testing, who are doing routine testing and testing hundreds of samples a week, have to stop once a quarter and basically show that their calibration curves are giving a linear relationship between the different concentration of the samples and what they're reading from the machine. And sometimes what you'll see is that as the column begins to fail, or if they have problems with their peristaltic pump, which pumps the fluid through the column as it runs, you start to get variations either at high or low concentrations and deviations from linearity along that curve. And so it's important to be able to show that, yeah, you could run hundreds of samples, but you have to be able to maintain that linear calibration curve. And when you don't, alarm bells should go off. And I think there's even programs that as the machine runs, lets the user know that, hey, we're starting to get something that's deviating, or you start to see what's called a floating baseline, where the baseline in the chromatogram starts increasing. And that just means that more shit's going. In this case, with HPLC, you're doing a detection by ultraviolet visible light. So you're taking the ultraviolet visible light as the fluid comes off of the column, and the different cannabinoids have different ultraviolet spectrums, so you're able to determine which cannabinoid is which, and also by running standards. The other thing that standards provide is that if you have an unknown peak and you don't know what it is, you could spike that sample. Say, is that thing THC? Well, you could spike it with delta-9 THC and see if that peak grows. If that peak grows, then you know that you've, identified the peak. But these chromatography, methods or devices are very useful for analyzing mixtures.
That the first lab opened in 2008.
First testing lab?
There's been testing on cannabis dating back decades, but obviously the first available ones couldn't offer
in the 90s. I built it.
Yeah. So, but the commercial labs testing for commercial growers only came out
one at a time, gentlemen.
Licensing.
One at a time. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Sam.
No, I was saying that I built it only for in-house use, because we were plant breeders, cannabis breeders, and we used it. We kept it full. We ran 50 to 100 samples a day.
Yeah, no, and that's what I think a lot of because none of the states started licensing cannabis, no commercial labs opened up until after we started seeing medical states opening up and having that need. So I think as legalization progresses worldwide, we'll start to see more standards, more validation on those standards, labs actually being held responsible to validate their lab standards, whether monthly or quarterly. And then when we start to see that deviation from those standards, then obviously labs want to be able or need to be able to shut down and either replace their column, replace their pumps, etc. Make sure that they can fall within those state or nationally mandated standards.
We started in 08 and 09 with testing here in California, and so we didn't have any access to lab or information. We tried to reach out to the Research Triangle at the University of Mississippi, and they laughed at us. So that was in like 07. So in 08, we started to reach out to Ethan Russo and some of the other people, and trying to find the right people to actually to bring to the United States to actually have the actual calibration liquid and equipment. So I didn't know you back then, Sam, because I wish I would have known you, because it would have made it a lot easier. But in the aspect
who helped me set up my lab was Dr. Brenneisen in Switzerland and Dr. Helsole in Mississippi. They both helped me.
Yeah, they weren't so happy to help us.
We used to do ring testing where we would send the exact same sample to all three of us. And if we didn't come out with the same results, we knew something was wrong. But we did. We came out with the exact same results.
I longed and dreamed that you people existed, and apparently you did exist. It's just we didn't necessarily touch base back then. But I also see Alec is
on everyone.
Yeah, I wanted to welcome the Dreamcatcher into the room. Alec Dixon in the house.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Dude, we've been talking about labs for a bit now.
I apologize. I'm just making it to this. You're like rocked me out of bed, and I appreciate that.
That's awesome. No, we've been going deep, man. Like,
I was gonna say, oh,
been going very deep, talking a lot about analytical testing, and it's been some good
I did some testing with the Green Cross there with Dr. Hornby back when it was '06, just after my accident. That's when I got hurt, and I learned about decarboxylizing and how those brownies affected my pain control. And that's when I kind of really found out about analytical testing and started seeing all those all that great wonders of cannabis at the beginning there. That was '06, '07, and that was some exciting times.
Without labs, you as a breeder, you don't know what you're doing. You're just guessing.
I think it's really awesome. We have the ability to test the flower, and we have the ability to test the soil, and in the cannabis industry, we're really getting good at both of those, and the standardization is starting to come together. And the thing that I'm really interested in is the actual reaction from the soil into the flower, which is really starting to test the endophytic reaction that's going on within the plant. And I don't know if any of you all know of any labs or anybody who is testing endophytes within the plant. That really is super exciting.
And like, for example, Taxol from the yew tree people were getting bark wanting to extract Taxol to cure cancer. But after further testing years later, they realized there was endophytic fungi and endophytic bacteria that was pulsing in the cambium between the yew bark and the tree, and the endophytes were extremely medicinal towards cancer and other things. So we started looking up endophytes in cannabis, and there's minimal papers on it. And the one paper I found located that there was up to 30 endophytic fungi in cannabis. Some of the endophytes were good to fight powdery mildew and botrytis. Other endophytes were possible to fight cancer. And we're not talking mycorrhizal fungi, and we're not talking about that. We're talking about endophytic fungi and bacteria that live inside plant tissue. And I feel like it may be a whole new medicinal frontier, and I'm wondering if any of you all have learned about that.
Go ahead.
Oh no, well, I just wanted to kind of jump in on that. That's I think that's one of my most passionate and exciting kind of directions where I see things are going. In so many ways, cannabis now, especially kind of what we're seeing in California with as much testing as being required. We're seeing so many of the.
Did somebody freeze up on us?
No, his mic went dead for some reason.
He got it.
No, he froze.
Yeah, he looked frozen to me.
He froze. So, we'll just build on that. We've taken that information to make our hemp oil. As we harvest the hemp, we harvest the roots, thanks to Ethan Rousseau and some of those papers that have been written on the roots. And we also use parts of the stalk and seeds in our medicine, because when you talk about whole plants, like Marcus's shirt, or whole plant medicine, we're looking for the full range. So,
and it's really awesome because we found papers, that date back to the 50s that look at hemp, and they're finding up to 30 different varietals of endophytic fungi within the cannabis plant. And say like a tomato or some of our other food plants, or maybe tobacco or corn, you're really only going to have a couple different varietals. It's super interesting that cannabis has so many, and we know that that's definitely playing in with cannabinoid and terpene production.
So Alec, now that you're back, I'd love to hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you for the patience there. I just connected to Wi-Fi, so I'm golden. So yeah, what I was kind of just wanting to kind of share with everybody here, kind of in response to the endophilic. Is that right?
Endophytic.
Endophytic. Yeah. Cool. So anyway, the way I was going on that thought is in so many ways, so cannabis testing, we've been, deep in, this is our 10th year, this is our decade of doing it, kind of, we started towards the end of 2009. And so being on this journey of analytical chemistry with cannabis and the science of cannabis has been, one of the most educational and magical experiences of my life. And in so many ways, especially, over the last few years, seeing the transition to this new space of regulated, kind of tested, these minimum quality standards that people have to meet to kind of, get product out in the market, in so many ways now. We're seeing the most fascinating trends around all the fails, right? And so my job in such a big way is whenever a compliance fail happens and somebody has to destroy product or remediate the product, that pretty much means they're never going to work with us again, because there's a $50,000-$100,000 plus loss at stake here. And so what we found really early on last year when testing kicked in is, the buck doesn't stop there. If you as a lab are just delivering a fee for service test and a certificate of analysis, and then bad news, with somebody having to destroy hundreds of thousands of dollars product, then, sure, they're never probably going to work with you again. But what else do you bring to the table? And so that's really where we've drawn on our past decade worth of experience of being in service to this plant and knowing this plant as well as we do, both on the, kind of cultivation, manufacturing level, but also then on testing. And so one of the things, and this is, I guess, the big point of what I was trying to make. So cannabis, this great bioaccumulating plant, now that we've tested it to higher standards than any other crop that's ever been tested, we're the testing is almost like showing this voice of the plant that's speaking about the legacy of the toxicity and the contamination that's happened in all these major agricultural areas, that are, and so in so many of these areas where the microbiome has been desertified, and now it's just eroded, soil that's just kind of, super low pH, super kind of high levels of heavy metals and residual pesticides from the environment, from the neighboring farms.
Soil, it's dirt.
Yeah, it's dirt. Exactly. It's no longer soil. And so in so many ways, like we're seeing this in California, we're seeing this massive movement towards kind of the establishment of appellations of origin and protected terms, and I love this conversation. I'm actually going to be speaking at a appellation conference, symposium at UC Berkeley in the next couple months. But basically, what we're seeing is, appellation is something in this new world that you have to wear whether or not you like it or not. And in certain areas, the appellation that you're growing in is almost going to be seen as a scarlet letter, because like I've begun to basically buy the 5 or 6 different pesticides that will show up either in flower or plant material or in extract. I've begun from the routine. I've had over 1,000 of these fail calls over the last year. But now I can begin to predict the appellation it was grown in by the pesticide signature that accompanies the crop. And that's one of the most mind-blowing things I've ever seen, because I can predict if it's grown by the almonds in Stanislaus or by the avocados in Carpinteria, because this appellation signature is following the plant. And so that's the worst case, I think, of the appellation conversation of where I'm seeing it go. But on the other side, unlike with Hale, Elaine Ingham, and Soil Food Web, and all the pioneering work of all the cannabis legends that have been trying to push the boundaries on organic farming to regenerative farming to understanding the symbiosis that exists in nature, and how to really talk terroir and appellations of origin, it's the microclimate region of the area, but it's the soil microbiome that exists. And I think and real quick, just to wrap the point. And so with that being said, we're I've been to several Elaine Ingham Compost 2 workshops. We're starting to do some of these trials, but they're showing whenever the soil microbiome's ideal, for the crop being grown comparatively to, say, hydroponically grown like tomatoes or other types of fruits, you can track the doubling of the secondary metabolites being produced in the plant whenever the microbiome's ideal. And it probably has something to do with these endophytic or the certain types of fungi. But whenever those, and so if you can. So if something's grown in the perfect microbiome in one of these real clean areas that haven't been bombed on for 40, 50 years by ag, where their soil is actually rich and flourishing, then, you can actually begin, we're starting to begin to track the secondary metabolite production being boosted in cannabis, which are terpenes in this case, and other, minor compounds that we're not even testing yet. But in so many ways, I'm seeing that as one of the biggest competitive advantages that cannabis farmer has in this new world, because if you are able to produce quality cannabis that has these markedly expressed higher amounts of these secondary metabolites like terpenes, as opposed to some of this monocrop cannabis that's grown in ag land that doesn't have the secondary metabolite boost, but instead has this pesticide signature accompanying it, it's a really fascinating way to kind of look at the field in front of everybody, and who's really at an advantage, even if somebody's in a small kind of more, small farm side of things instead of like 30 acres monocrop, who's really at advantage?
That's where analytical testing really aids the regenerative farmer, or different bioregions, which are essentially appellations, because as South Africa and Colombia and all these countries come in with thousands and thousands of hectares, you got to be like, oh, am I going to be able to sell, the weeds still? And you're like, yeah, you're definitely going to, because of the certain bioregions that you live in, a certain terroir. And through analytical testing and soil testing, you'll be able to show the purity and show maybe the unique chemovars that you have. And I think that's extremely valuable.
And people trying to flip and people trying to just grow kind of, now that it's make hemp great again, and this whole movement of, all the farmers just going for it. If you shift, 1,000-acre GMO corn farm with glyphosate and everything else in the soil, I think a lot of the testing kind of eventually, once it, people then have to either go straight to isolating CBD to a single molecule just to purify it to not fail, or they're gonna have to go grow rope for 10 years, while they sit this one out and figure it out, then clean up the environment, and while everybody else is able to, kind of show what they've done. Because it's almost like chickens come home to roost moment, for farming.
Yeah.
Did you hear about the
they did
appellations?
Oh, go ahead.
They're trying to get them in Los Angeles.
Appellation in Los Angeles?
Indoors, under lights, in container soil, and they want appellations.
Is that what's your opinion on that? That's a silly proposition.
I think it sucks.
Well, I would jump in here with a conversation on California's version of appellations of origin. I was with the Appellations Working Group in Sacramento with CDFA and Cal Cannabis this past year, and there's an important distinction to be made. What the folks in Los Angeles would like is for state law to change so that you can designate a geographic area of origin, which fits right into what Alec was just saying. But it's not appellations of origin. Appellations of origin are different. That has to do with standards and practices and cultivars, at least by law here in California. And there are two different programs. There's the appellation of origin program, which is very exclusive, if you will. And it requires creating a local appellation group that then applies to Cal Cannabis for permission to have an appellation of origin. Whereas the geographic indicator system is what LA is after, and state law allows a county of origin designation on packaging. And what we'd like to see changed is it could be, and there is a bill in the legislature to make this happen, that it would be a city or county of origin. And that would allow the LA indoor growers and the San Francisco and Oakland indoor growers. Nobody knows Alameda County as a source of indoor cannabis, but people know Oakland. And so, yeah, they're two different programs. It's really important to distinguish between them. The geographic indicator, county or city of origin, is a very inclusive. It includes everybody that's doing cannabis activity in that geographic area. An appellation of origin is a very exclusive thing. That's all I got. Thank you.
With wine, you have to grow it under the sun. You don't add large amounts of fertilizer to grow more grapes. That's not the way it's done. They prefer sandy dirt soil.
Yeah, France is that there's actually appellation d'origine, a French term, is actually fairly well protected in France just because of the wine industry. And it traces back to, different types of wine being grown in different appellations in France. That way they could produce uniform wine that whether that wine is distributed throughout the world, if it says it's a Burgundy wine or says it's a Champagne wine, we know that it's going to be produced in that region under the same soil with the same weather. That way, if you try one year versus a different year, you can see variation within the year. But if you try two different wineries from the same year, they should have fairly uniform grape.
And that's what I want with cannabis.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way for, because everybody's focusing on trying to grow 1,000 acres. What they don't realize is that you're going to make way more money as a craft farmer growing high quality high quality flavors in biodynamic soils, producing phenomenal flavors that are going to be either extracted or smoked or even consumed for the flavonoid profile, because all those other terpenes, not the cannabinoids, are going to be what increases the value of your CBDs or THC. Right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And to that point too, I think in this world where like the big ag approach towards monocropping, towards moving it to conventional ag land has happened, I almost feel like the plant's trolling us in this way, because in this great time of legalization where everybody's coming in to take their piece and to crush the competition, it's actually setting people up for massive failures that we're walking through every day, around these unavoidable residual environmental contaminants that have become legacy to that land as a result of the Green Revolution and as a result of post World War II practices around petrochemicals and nerve agents being now used on treating growing plants and treating keeping away pests and pathology. But now, like, I really see from the analytical side of testing on cannabis, it's almost really in reinforcing the slow food movement ideals of know the source of where you're getting your products and your ingredients, and it's more about quality of ingredients than it is just getting an abundance of biomass, because whenever it comes to,
you could look on the bright side. After 100 years of growing cannabis, the soil
yes,
will be pretty cleaned up.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
and after a bunch of people have to go grow rope for 10 years, because I mean, a lot of these people, like, I'm watching it happen. They're being forced in these positions where, there's these certain regions that are almost getting blacklisted as a result of, these like, consistent. I mean, so many people are spinning their wheels. They're building out these like $25 million manufacturing facilities, and then they just have people on the road going to all the mega farms looking for material. They're taking samples of it. They're taking like a representative sample of, say, that 1,000 pounds. They're micro extracting it so they can concentrate anything off of it to see if it tests clean. And then they bring it to the lab to test dirty. And just so on and so forth. So people are just spinning their wheels in this time. And what we're seeing is so many of the small craft farms that have the quality ingredients, that are preserving their terpenes, that are diversifying their terpenes. People are starting to like lock in long-term trim contracts with these people for like $500 to $800 a pound for trim, in this moment where nobody can even get rid of their trim in a lot of these other areas unless they're going straight again to isolate, or remediation, and so in so many ways, I feel like it's not only creating this barrier of entry for people to come in and try to pilfer this plant, and it's giving this massive, and robust advantage then to the people that have taken care of this plant, that have been a steward of this plant for so long, that haven't destroyed their environments. And and then through that, I think it's also helping to raise the awareness to the food we eat and what's on the food. And then I don't want to smoke kind of glyphosate or any other pesticide or fungicide, so why would I want to eat it? And I really in real time then see kind of this effect on the plant, exactly like you're saying, Sam. It's like it's going to have this effect on shifting ag.
It's trolling the people that are wasting money trying to grow.
Yes.
You grow for money, right? Because a lot of those people are going to be planting in contaminated soil, and the plant's going to bioaccumulate all of that stuff in various different parts of the plant. We've seen the plant will accumulate some of the heavy metals in the seed husk, the seed shell, but it actually will bioaccumulate other pesticides in other parts of the plant. So
not to mention radioactive nucleotides.
Yeah, so it's going to bioaccumulate it, but it's going to bioaccumulate it in different parts of the plant. So no matter what your crop's going to be, you're going to have to be able to test and identify what those bioaccumulate.
Yeah, and it's really
in the
important
case of
to test your inputs as well. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then as you're developing that process, obviously using those contaminated biomass, there's ways to clean it. If you have competent labs and then competent analytical labs that can help you develop a method to remove those contaminants, but you're going to have to go through a greater amount of refining.
Right.
So then, and there's going to be a market for distillate and isolate because it's easier to export due to the 3% or 1%.
Hot dog water.
But that said, everyone who watches Hash Church obviously understands that higher quality is more desirable than bulk. So being able to produce, having quality as well as, as trying to develop quality into scale, there's going to end up having better results for the farmers and better results for the hash makers.
And Mike, real quick, a question for you. So we've recently started to conduct a series of experiments, because of we have this hypothesis that a lot of the bioaccumulation of metals and pesticides, we are seeing a bioaccumulation, through the plant of it, whatever the toxin is, right? Heavy metals, we're really seeing kind of on the flower whenever they're being foliar applied, when water and a combination of foliar inputs are being foliar applied every 5 to, so the accumulation of metals we're seeing on flower happening much more from foliar applicants than from, soil coming up through the roots and the stalk up into the fruit.
What metals? Can I ask what metals?
Cadmium, arsenic, lead, and mercury. We don't see.
Water?
Well, so that's kind of it. So
my second question is: are they watered overhead by pivot, or are the fields flooded? Right, because that's going to change the delivery on the plant.
Right. Sure. Well, so we see a 2% fail rate in flower for heavy metals, 1% for arsenic, 1% separately for cadmium, and so all over the state. And so when we see
what's the failure rate, or what's the threshold that you have to be below?
200 part per billion, 0.2 ppm.
Yeah, I mean, this is just like ridiculous. Isn't that ridiculous? Don't you think?
Yeah,
well, 2% fail rate is that? I mean, 2% fail rate is not like egregiously insane.
Is anything in the state of California below 2 whatever pp billion?
We only see 2% fail. So I mean, 98% is passing.
Right.
So anyway, so real quick, so
it's either going to be contamination from mining or lumber.
It's all that, but then
I think a lot of it. If I could jump in for a second, I think a lot of it's coming from folks who are foliar feeding as versus flooding their root zone.
Yeah, well, that's what we've found, because like one of the biggest parts of my job is when somebody's failing, I engage in a root cause analysis, and we go through a series of environmental assessment tests, such as testing water, testing all the individual foliar inputs that you're adding to the mixes, and with 95+% confidence, we've begun to identify the foliar inputs more so than the water that you're feeding into the roots. Because you could take any really high level arsenic guanos and all these other things, and they're going to accumulate in the plant, but it's not going to bioaccumulate to the fruit. And I was having a series of conversations with Roy Upton, who's the executive director of the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia, and he wasn't actually surprised by the fact that there was such a low fail rate on flower, 2%. And whenever he was getting into it, he was making the comparison of American ginseng, because with American ginseng, it's a perennial plant that grows year after year in the soil. And so through the monograph process, they were actually able to identify the doubling each year of heavy metal accumulation in the plant as it's growing in the soil year after year. But he was saying, well, with cannabis, since cannabis is such a short flowering annual plant, maybe if it flowered another 18, 25 weeks or something, maybe there'll be more of an accumulation further from the roots to the stalk up into the fruit, right? And so the fact is, we're not seeing the craziest fail rates in flower, but when we are seeing it, it's being kind of correlated back to the water, because it's like, are you filtering or unfiltering your water? RO, for what you're spraying on the plants, so that's the start. And then it's like, okay, well, guano, seaweed, fish, pH ups and downs. But Bavaria boss, we've tested 4 part per million of cadmium in like Botanigard, with just a series of different kind of both beneficial or biological pesticides or foliar sprays and nutrients. But I guess the big part of what I was kind of going to with this is, in monocrop farming cannabis, we have this hypothesis that if you're row cropping 30 acres of cannabis, you no longer harvesting it with the sanctity at which we've harvested this plant all our life, which is where you're taking the inflorescence of the plant, the sugar leaf, the flower, you're separating it from the stalk, but whenever you're talking about farming with tractors on this level, and you're truly farming for biomass, where you chip in the stalk back with the flower, so you can do these industrial scale extractions on it, we're really curious as to whether there's going to be like multiple time increase of metals and also potentially pesticides, because you're using the stalk. It's almost, again, the plant trolling. You can't fucking harvest this plant like broccoli or whatever, and whenever if you're going to try to harvest it in this way that's not, you know, cherishing the flowers and all the, you know, the part of the plant that we're harvesting, and you use the stock, is the stock going to bring about like 5 times contamination concentration on top of the fact that you're already contaminated in the ag land?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it all has to do with, you know, we can liken it to, you know, grape growing. We can liken it to, you know, the way that some Japanese gardeners will, you know, cut down and only grow melons in one specific way, and they'll put them in shape so that they grow a heart-shaped melon that they can sell. And then in Japan, that kind of craft melon production has melons selling at dramatically higher prices, and that really boils down to, you know, good genetics of the plant, good terroir, which can be how the plant's grown, how it's cultured, and etc. But in many cases, they're taking much more care of the plant than they are growing it on in trying to grow it on in mass. You know, when we're growing monocultures of CBD, you have to take more. It's difficult to have the labor that's incorporated in it, so that you're going to see stratification in the CBD industry, where, you know, a craft grown CBD flower reach a premium, whereas if you grow it in the desert for biomass, it's not going to produce as many of those monoterpenoids, because a lot of those monoterpenoids are going to get flashed off during the drying due to the desert heat. But
go
you
ahead.
know, for isolate production, there's use for that, and but like you said, if you're not removing those fan leaves, you're going to be increasing the amount of wax concentration that's in your blend of biomass. If you're not removing the stems, you're going to, you know, be able to pull whatever is potentially bioaccumulated in those stems. And if you're trying to extract seeded bud, you're not only going to extract the oil that's in the seeds, but you're going to extract some of the heavy metals that are found in the seed coat that are bioaccumulated in the seed.
Well, and that's
hold on. Somebody's asking, but what about chemtrails?
You know, what's really funny about chemtrails is, I mean, like, what's funny about chemtrails is everybody always thought when heavy metal testing kicked in, the areas that are highly sprayed were going to be the ones that just had the craziest egregious fail rates for metals. And I mean, we're testing for cadmium. We're not testing. I mean, you know, in the idea of what, you know, the thought of what has been in chemtrails, you know, maybe if we tested for more metals, we'd see, but we're not seeing any type of insanely higher rate of fail. You know,
are you testing for aluminum?
Well, so aluminum. No, so the California panel. Well, so when we test the full library, we test. We're building like a Prop 65 metal test to test for, you know, however many total metals are on that list. Right now, like, you know, the kind of throughput service we offer is primarily for these 4 regulated metals: lead at 500 part per billion, mercury at 100 part per billion, arsenic and cadmium each at 200 part per billion. And so, you know, like, it was interesting because everybody, whenever phase 3 kicked in at the beginning of this year, 2019, and heavy metal testing was part of the regimen, everybody was thinking it was going to be this extinction level event and everybody was going to be dead, and just it was going to be the thing that killed everybody's business. But, you know, it's been quite the opposite of what we've seen. You know, again, it's, you know, these really low % fail rates. Like lead, we're almost exclusively seeing as a part of the manufacturing process, cartridges particularly, but also, you know, shitty, cheap Chinese glass and other types of, you know, leaching.
Any shiny metal from China could potentially be contaminated with either lead or cadmium or nickel. Or I'm surprised, just given the whole Aaron Brockovich thing, that Cali hasn't also put chromium on that list, right? Chromium-6 is another bad actor. It's interesting because chromium-3 is fine, right? You can buy chromium-3 at GNC and pop a couple capsules of it today. But chromium-6 that's the Aaron Brockovich chromium, right? That's the bad chromium. That's the chromium that they use to coat airplanes and ships with and shit like that. That's
well, you know, and Mark, you know, what's interesting about the whole thing is, because I mean, California, from what I see, did you know, they learned and advanced past kind of all the, you know, mistakes of the previous states that regulated. And so, you know, some say they went too far, but again, like, you know, whenever you look at these, like, you know, California average fail rates across all these different categories, it's not as gnarly as, you know, everybody thought. You know, once these minimum levels of quality hit, you know, we've seen from before regulation to after, it's almost like 50-60% reduction in a lot of these common pesticides, kind of making it through to the final retail space. But anyway, like with the metals and with pesticides, though, there could be more compounds added, like chromium 6, like nickel. I've been hearing of nickel poisoning being outbreaking from like cartridges and like nickel plate cartridges. But then also glyphosate. How much glyphosate sprayed in California? We're seeing kind of hemp farmers that are desiccating 30 acres of their tomatoes so that they can kind of pull it out and then replant it with hemp. Is that going to be poison? I think so. I would never want to touch that. And should that be tested for?
These smoking reports that I'm seeing in the news?
Or what?
Myclocards.
Myclocards. Well, I mean, it's unknown. Like, I mean, that's a whole other
I'm
pickle.
gonna say
like
yes.
The whole e-juice. Well, dude, the e-juice thing is one of the gnarliest things I've ever seen in my life, because I was puffing those jewels really, really tough. We started doing a pretty big assessment of the e-juice, because somebody told me that it's like that e-cigs and the nicotine that come from e-cigs. Like, I was sitting there just puffing one of these jewels, and my buddy was like, dude, you're really smart. I can't believe you're just puffing that thing. He's like, where do you think that nicotine comes from? And I was like, what? It's like synthesized nicotine salt? He's like, no, dude, it's the hot dog water distillate of the tobacco crop. And I was like, pow! And so I immediately went back to our lab. I submitted
hot dog water.
Not
and
made
I submitted
like that. It's more isolated, like cocaine would be, because it's an alkaloid. You can crash out the hydrochloride salt of nicotine.
Well, so I'm sure, because that's what's real quick, because Mark, that's what we're seeing. So we're seeing, if we test a bunch of tobacco, like Marlboro and all these other kind of conventional ground tobacco crops, we see a series of pesticides, right? Cat 1, Cat 2 pesticides, different concentrations, et cetera, et cetera. When we're testing e-juice, we're almost exclusively seeing diminozide, Alar, also known as Alar,
right.
So diminozide, because there's certain compounds, like even myclobutanol is a good example, like that need some pesticides in the extraction process will separate with certain processes, non-polar, polar, with filtration, these different things. But we're seeing other ones, will kind of linearly concentrate with the extraction. And so what's really, really weird
it's only 20 degrees off of this
cannabis, right? But I don't know what's up with the diminozide conversation, but diminozide, phospholode, flower dragon, this plant growth retardant, that was part of the Alar scare of the 80s, where Alar was approved to use on apple crops, and they're and on orchards, and they're making huge apples, and they're all going to baby food. And then this EPA report came out in like 1987 or 88, detailing the carcinogenic properties of diminozide and how it broke down into a chemical called UDMH, which is in the hydrazine family, which is even more toxic, like a rocket fuel derivative compound. And from that point on, it was banned for use on any consumable crop since. But then it was like really popularly used, in the, late 90s through kind of, a lot of the 2000s by various types of growers growing OG Kush, stretchier kind of plants and in indoor environments. And so it really popularized, among cannabis, but now it's a category 1 pesticide. So anything detected at the detection limit or above, which is about 30 part per billion, 0.03, is a fail. And so we've seen the fail rates of it on cannabis go down incredibly low, way below 1%, so that's amazing. But the fact that e-juice and the fact that cigarettes are showing such consistent amounts of diminozide across all the crop is really, it's blowing my mind, that's and because we're testing these e-pins, and there's like 15 part per million of lead, and there's like 2,000 times the fail limit for diminozide on them.
And then
look at this California test.
Look what just came out with this week with, there's approximately 20 to 25 people now with actual breathing issues due to illegal cartridges that have never been tested. Right. Usually product that would never, as people would know, would never even go to testing. So they didn't even send it to that. So they backyard blast it, and or very professionally blast it. There's very professional illegal setups nowadays.
Well, and that's one of the saddest.
It's causing breathing problems to where people can't, basic oxygen transpiration is a fucking problem right now. That's a problem, people. This is a huge.
Yeah, no, and the whole thing, all these comas, everything, like it's really fascinating time that all this breakout of vape related issues are popping up. And I mean, what is it coming from? Is it coming from the e-vapes or e-juices? Is it coming partially from cannabis and the contaminants that are in it? It's probably a combination, but
prohibition.
It's caused by prohibition. I couldn't agree more. And what's so massive about this whole story, and I think it really that much more, kind of, I guess, intensifies the need for analytical testing and these minimum quality standards to hit for public health and safety concerns. Because whenever you have all the legacy toxic material from California that is, and other states that are then, being filled in carts and sent to the East Coast without any regard to people's health or safety, and they're literally getting the dirtiest stuff that's there that can't hit the market in any of the regulated spaces. It's like, this is, it's scary.
I was just going to say, there's people who are pirating packaging of like the more successful legitimate brands in established markets like Colorado and California. And now that other people, unswarthy people, can buy this packaging, now they can basically rip that packaging off and put some sub-quality product into what a consumer might think is, oh, that's coming from that vape company in California, when actually it's not. It's just coming from someone who bought the packaging that from the company who's ripping off that company. And hey, just while I have the floor, just for clarification issues, because I saw this come up in the chat. Yes, arsenic is not a metal, right? But arsenate is a component that's been used for many years in pressure-treated lumber. And a lot of that pressure-treated lumber that was made like in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, that green lumber for picnic tables and swing sets and stuff like that, a lot of that lumber is now coming out of service, coming out of useful service, and it's ending up in landfills. And when that, wherever it goes, arsenate itself, so it's not arsenic, the material arsenic, it's actually arsenate, which is AS, I think, 05 or something like that, highly mobile in groundwater. And so that just, again, points to, human impact, that a lot of places like Florida, for example, where there's been a lot of development on the coast, I don't believe that there's a natural source for arsenic in Florida, but over the last several years and all the development that goes on the coastline and marshy areas require what? Pressure-treated lumber to go into those, sensitive wetland areas where, like what would typically be put into a pier or, any wood that has to go into a saltwater exposure has to be super, super loaded with all kinds of chemicals. You can see kind of like the green salts that come spewing out of these. Well, for a long time, that was something called CCA, which is chromated copper arsenate, CCA, right? And so this complex was used to make, telephone poles and railroad ties, and you've seen that pressure-treated lumber, right? So that lumber, which again is part of like, coastal development, say around state like Florida, which is about to get hit by a huge fucking hurricane, has basically imported all of this arsenic into their water system. And so again, there is no natural source of arsenic in Florida, and all the development that's gone on over the last 70 years or so around the Florida coastline has imported all this arsenic. So as this lumber comes out of use, it definitely puts arsenate in the soil. It's kind of nothing we could do about it. It's kind of like, this is just the price that we pay for using chromated copper arsenic from, I think it was discovered by some Indian dude in like the 30s, and then AT&T bought the patent, and that green lumber was everywhere. Well, that green lumber actually replaced, in some cases, creosote, which was used to treat railroad ties and telephone poles. That's that black tarry shit that's cancerous as hell. But, you're trading one poison for another. But I just wanted to mention that about arsenic. So in areas like California or other areas where wood treatment was used and arsenic was used as part of that wood treatment, as that wood comes out of useful service, yeah, it ends up getting leached into the water system. You can't help it.
I would just remind the panel that I have been posting questions from the chat room into our own private chat room here on Zoom. So if you open it, you'll see there's some questions. Just some people are a little bit more intense about getting their questions answered than others. But
hey, Mark, what was that question about CBD a couple questions ago? What was I seem to have lost it.
The question was regarding multi-soil zone.
No, it was before that. It was the first one was CBD production. I heard CBD production can be altered in distillate by lengthening decarbing times, and THC can be converted to CBD in this process. How true is this? That was the first question. I posted that an hour ago. And
THC can be converted into CBD. Is that what they said?
He said vice versa, but that's what he's wondering.
The question mark is
I've heard about it.
Conversion of CBD into THC via isomerization during distillation.
Yeah, I mean that's contra-thermodynamic, right? So THC is lower energy. If given the opportunity, CBD will convert over to THC, and that's a well-documented fact by Raphael Mechoulam himself.
He had this the other way around. He was asking if THC can be converted to CBD. So I suspect he was confused. And
no, I mean not. I think some people are trying that. There was a guy who had that idea, who posted for some input on one of the Facebook cannabis chat rooms, not chat rooms, but groups where we sometimes talk about these things. But yeah, I mean, you have to figure out a way to it's going to take energy to do that, but it's going to take a particular catalyst to do that. I mean, believe me, if you can figure out a way to do that, that's very, very valuable, because certainly people want to take hot CBD and turn it into all CBD and take away the THC. I think what a lot of people are doing with their, so when you're doing hemp extraction and you're getting a CBD isolate from it, the isolate comes from the crystallization from a mother liquor, and that mother liquor still is enriched with cannabinoids, and in most cases, depending on what you're extracting, you can get multiple crops of CBD crystal from a single mother liquor. But when you've robbed it of all the CBD that it can basically, you can get, like now the mother liquor is beyond the saturated, no more CBD, have a THC and other minor cannabinoid enriched mixture that I believe a lot of people are converting over to CBN, because CBN has incredible market value right now, and you're making it into something that's not THC. Kind of cool, right? So you're basically destroying it, but you're destroying it into something that you can actually sell. And actually, if you think about it, if you look at the economics, it's actually a production process to make CBN that, by the way, makes a little bit of CBD along the way, because you'll make a lot more money on your CBN.
And can cannabis pick up gold? I mean, if you grow it in near Sutter's Mill and near the Sacramento area, will it pick up gold?
That's an interesting experiment that it's going to cost a lot of money to figure out. You know, so what you need to do is
I just want my plants to do my panning for me.
That's my one. Use it. Okay.
It has been shown to pick up the heavier metals, but I don't know if gold would, because you'd have to have some. I would go.
You
back
have to have a soluble version of it. I mean, and to solubilize gold, you're taking nice, expensive gold and you're dissolving it with hydrochloric acid or sulfuric acid to make some kind of gold solution.
Fungi that exudates something that can solubilize the gold in the rock, and then have that fungi then absorb it and translocate it into the plant. But that's going to be
that's going to be a little bit of work. I'll say that's going to be a project that I don't think is going to be well accepted because of the genetic engineering involved.
Hey, Mark, I'd love to kind of jump in on a part of that thought of the pressure treated wood. You know, one of another really, really fascinating trends that we've kind of seen since the beginning of last year with regard to a couple different pesticides is, you know, one of them is called chloridane. Chloridane is, it was an old kind of DDT-like compound that has been banned for use on any consumer.
Oh, yeah. They used to spray that around, they used to spray that in the trench around foundations when they built homes. It's a badass fucking insecticide that lasts for hundreds of years.
Yeah, exactly. It's got like 100-year half-life. And so they also used to pressure treat wood with it. And so we see in drying spaces, if you're drying in kind of like say a barn or some space where there's open foundational wood where it was pressure treated, we're seeing the off-gassing of that pesticide happen to where we're seeing these
what levels
pop up.
are you seeing, like ppm or ppb or what?
PPB mainly, but you know, with chloridane, since it's also a category 1 pesticide, anything at or above the detection limit of about 30 parts per billion fail. But so we're seeing kind of right around there showing up in flower that's basically being dried in these spaces. And then in extract, we're seeing it kind of showing up in failing amounts, you know, kind of at, you know, maybe a few hundred part per billion. But it's a trend that we've seen, and we begin to also, you know, kind of, I mean, whether it's just a certain trend, but we've seen, you know, a lot of these chloridane fails, we're seeing very kind of regionally happen also, you know, in areas like Watsonville, and, you know, where all berries and strawberries and all the things are, you know, and you know, so there's a many, you know, whether it was the foundational wood in greenhouses, you know, that are kind of open and exposed in the space that are off-gassing when temperature, humidity kind of differentials are happening, or whether it's in drying spaces. Because then on the other side with drying spaces, you know, one of the biggest fails trends that we've seen with indoor cultivation is around basically the use of aerosol bug bombs. You know, because historically people were taking these total release bombs like Attain, which is bifenthrin and piperonal butyroxide, Pylon TR, which is chlorophenapure, I think it's Duraplex, which is chloropyrifos, which is an organophosphate, and then, you know, pyrethrin bombs, and there's others, but essentially, you know, people would take these bombs that are intended for 10,000 square foot greenhouse spaces, and they wouldn't, you know, even organic people, because you know, before we opened up SC Labs, I was working many years in the hydroponic industry, and, you know, kind of essentially selling bombs and pesticide options to people, and, you know, trying to train people to be on a more organic integrated pest management and prevention approach. But you know, kind of be that as it may, you know, everybody would use these bombs, and so even organic people that would claim to never spray pesticides or do anything negative to the plant, they would still, in between harvesting and indoor room, they would take 1,000 square foot room, they would light off a 10,000 square foot bomb, you know, for, you know, one of these pesticide bombs. And essentially they're lighting off in this indoor environment where it then coats every surface area inside the space, whether it's drywall, sheetrock, and it just sucks in like a sponge. And so essentially whenever you do that harvest after harvest after harvest, year after year after year, you know, there becomes this persistent buildup of these compounds that are then unavoidable. And we're seeing years after their last use, we're like, particularly for the CH compounds like chlorophenapure and chloropyrifos, both category 1, you know, Pylon most particularly, because it was so ubiquitous and available just over the counter in hydro stores that people like, and so we will be failing like years after, and then we're helping in all this environmental assessment work further, like how the F is this here? I haven't used this in 2.5 years or a year and a half, whatever. And so we'll then send out like swabs, and we'll take chunks of drywall that we'll then run testing on. And we've seen like 10 part per million built up in drywall in, you know, certain really worst case scenarios. And in those cases, we're seeing the flowers, you know, that like even whenever they're grown fully organic, you know, and this has happened when people have even just purchased an like a existing LA indoor, you know, warehouse grow, and, you know, where it was previously bombed on forever, you know, now kind of, even though they're growing all organic, you know, all living soil, all predatory bugs, we you know, the first harvest out of this facility, we're seeing like 700 part per billion, 0.7 in the flower. And then whenever it's turned into extract, we're seeing over, you know, 2+ part per million in it, you know. And this is, again, like it's this buildup kind of taking place from bong.
These part per billion determinations you're doing on the mass spec, right? On the mass spectrometer, I would take it, right?
GCLC mass spec. Well, GCMS and LCMS both.
Yeah.
To test for.
Yeah. So you need the sensitivity of the mass spectrometer to be able to do. Again, I think this is just before you joined today, Alec. We were talking about that. There's this NIST library of all different kinds of compounds, and you could basically match the mass spectrum of what you think is chlorpyrifos to know that that is chlorpyrifos, and there's no question about it that peak in that material at that ppb level. But again, the sensitivity of the mass spectrometer is such that you are down at the ppb level. And I got news for you, folks. We live in a fucking contaminated world.
That's what I
And
realized.
if you start looking at everything that humans come in contact with at the part per billion level, you'll be amazed. I always used to say it's like taking a lint brush to a New York City sidewalk. You're going to find everything. You're going to find all kinds of shit that you never knew on food, on your clothing. And when you look at the part per billion level, think about it just for a second. So you have percentage, right? Then you have per tens, and then per hundreds, per thousand. This is billion, okay? One part per billion. So imagine a whole rail car full of vodka and one little shot of vermouth. That's like a part fucking per billion. It's an incredible, again, opportunity that we have to use analytical chemistry to look at such levels at cannabis. But really, I mean, if you were looking to go look at some backwoods smokes, or go buy some produce from Whole Foods, would they hold up to this part per billion scrutiny that you're looking at? I mean, will we see any residuals at the part per billion level of stuff that's in current commerce? So are they artificially holding cannabis to a new level of purity when we live in a fucking contaminated world, and the plant we love sucks up everything from the soil,
Mark, is the
and
answer
from the atmosphere that it lives in,
If we can't beat them, join them in the poisoning of this supply chain too.
Alec, I know this is going to be a big case for you guys. When edible producers down in California, they have to make sure that all of their ingredients in their supply chain are going to pass the certified testing.
Oh yeah.
So in a way, the plant trolls the industry again because it's making all of our ingredients better for our consumers.
No, but I love your thought on that.
Hold on, but it actually adds a caveat, because you saw probably this week too, Alec, of the study regarding how chocolate actually affects the potency testing regarding cannabis. So we're finding even food products actually can throw off testing altogether. So another aspect that we're learning as we're dealing with more normalized products from the food chain coming into the ring of our testing requirements.
Well, and so on 2 points on that. One, so Etienne, on yours, which is 100% valid. I mean, we've been doing analytical chemistry on cannabis now for 10 years. And it has taken us about that long to figure this plan out, and all the different matrices that are presented with infused cannabis in it. So chocolate, gummy bears. Gummy bears are like the bane of my existence, to resolve a gummy bear matrix and then pull the 2.5 milligrams and accurately, repeatedly be able to test over time. Kind of that. Those are the
catchers. You guys use catchers, don't you?
Well, different for different steps. I mean, catchers we used to use on our pesticide prep. I don't know if we use it on our gummy prep. But that's if you're recommending that, I'm definitely going to bring that to my team.
Well, are you doing are you freezing the gummy with liquid nitrogen? Or what are you doing to macerate it to? That might be your guys' IP.
I mean, it's the whole, because if you blend, I mean, and this is a bit of a tangent because I wanted to kind of hit back on this other side with kind of, is testing kind of on cannabis too much, to Mark's point, but yeah, I mean, you know, we've worked through all these different matrices, you know, kind of, and a lot of the, you know, whenever you start working with a manufacturer that's, you know, kind of making infused products, you know, such a big part of the job of a lab that we bring to the table is to do a bunch of upfront testing, for one, to be able to, you know, demonstrate and prove our worth in being able to accurately and repeatably test this particular type of product, whether it's chocolate or gummy, you know. But then beyond that, it's us helping to identify all these pain points in the other ingredient supply chain that are going into this cannabis formulation, because we're seeing all kinds of trends, you know, with like people making orange mints, you know, where they're taking orange essential oil and then making a cannabis infused mint with it. You know, we're finding that chlorpyrifos is, you know, in one of the most common organophosphates sprayed on citrus. So of course, the essential oil of that is going to have ultra concentration. And then you take the tiniest amount of that ingredient and flavor your mints, and you just failed the entire batch. You know, and this goes to chocolate also. Chocolate is a known bioaccumulator of phytoremediator of cadmium. And we've engaged with like many experts in the cacao industry since we've seen this issue, because, you know, with the percentage of cacao, 35%, 47%, 75+% cacao, we'll see a linear increase in cadmium, like up to multiple part per million in various sources of cacao with the percentage increase in cacao. And so come to find out, whenever cacao is grown in mountainous regions of the world, like the Andes, it's always going to have this known issue of cadmium bioaccumulation. And so the cacao industry had to pivot whenever they were trying to meet these European Union standards that are really, really strict on metals in the product, in the final form product that are being sold to the European Union markets. And so they've had to identify this whole kind of issue. And as an industry, they came to find out that it's whenever you're growing cacao in mountainous regions like the Andes, cadmium's always an issue. But whenever you're sourcing it from other areas like Africa and kind of the, you know, Central America and such, then, you know, the cadmium is no longer an issue. But it's you know, the cannabis regulation in these ways, it's putting people up to the highest kind of, you know, robust quality standards that anything's ever had to be applied to. And there's landmines every which direction around us, Mark, because of what your point is, because we've toxified the environment. The legacy of the Green Revolution has destroyed the soil. It's like contaminated everything. But is that the answer? We just, you know, kind of just sink to that low, or we set the new high standard that eventually anything else that we're going to be consuming should meet, you know, because it's like, I mean, are these, you know, I mean, just with like, I mean, I could just go off on the glyphosate thing, but it's like glyphosate kills the microbiome, you know, it gives, you know, creates leaky gut, which then creates all the food allergies, which then creates all the autoimmune reactions that, you know, kind of then create autoimmune conditions, all the cancer, you know, so much of all the illness and suffering that humans are now suffering from, you know, in so many ways stems from this chemical revolution that has now created this completely ubiquitous part per billion, part per trillion level of every contaminant, PFOA, PFOS in the environment, now in our bodies. But you know, from what we're seeing in California, one of the largest agricultural states in the United States, you know, kind of even with the most robust pesticide, heavy metal, mycotoxin, aspergillus standards that have ever been applied, you know, across each of these categories, we don't see so pesticides, we see about 2 to 3% fail rate. Metals, we see about 3% fail rate. Microbial impurities, now that yeast and mold and total aerobic bacteria aren't the focus of regulations, and it's just the pathogenic aspergillus, salmonella, and E. coli species, we see about 2% or less fail rate across all products. You know, and so, and I'll wrap the point with this. I don't mean to just be all sesquipedalian with it, but essentially, you know, back in 2015 to 2017, we weren't testing for 66 of the most common agricultural pesticides that are in California. We're testing for 12 of the most common pesticides, things like Eagle 20, you know, myclobutanol, bifenazate, abamectin, paclo, diminozide, you know, spiramethicin, imidacloprid. So we're testing for these really common ones that were used in cannabis. And in flower, 2015 to 2017, for these 12 pesticides, and when we're testing them, we're seeing them in way higher part per billion, if not part per million levels. You know, with our old kind of mass spec systems, they weren't nearly as sensitive as our new. And so even then, whenever there was no regulations and people were just doing the damn thing, we saw in flower about 30% fail rate for one of these 12 pesticides. And then when it came to extracts, we saw anywhere from 50 to 75% fail rate. And 50% was more like butane extracts and CO2, stuff like that. But then when you got more refined distillate, it went up to 75% fail rate. Now that California put this minimum level of quality standards in place that everybody, whether David or Goliath, have to hit just to get product to the market, we've seen pretty much for all compliance testing, we've seen all these fail rates go down to less than 2%, less than 3%, for pesticides, and that's across, concentrates and flowers. We see obviously a much higher fail rate on the R&D and process testing end as people are screening their supply chain and ingredients before they get their product for market. But that's like that's mind blowing.
Hey, Alec, can I ask, can you tell? Well, obviously, if the levels, I'm sure would make sense, but can you distinguish someone who's directly applying these pesticides versus a drift, result?
Yeah,
that would so you basically see the people who fail up here and then the people who fail down here, and this is drift, and these are the people who are applying.
Well, because I mean, we'll see certain trends where across every batch in a greenhouse, everything will fail, that we can trace back to a clone that was dipped, or maybe an early spray where they thought they'd be able to kind of get away with it and the residual wasn't going to be as long. Right. Versus, in a lot of cases when we're testing, kind of these major greenhouses in different ag areas, we're seeing kind of more regional pesticide kind of exposure, that are real close to vents, that that are where air is being pulled in from outside, where right. Drift can happen. We're seeing kind of more, kind of less systemic, or I guess across the entirety of the harvest, and more regionally kind of located. And so then we'll go in and send out swabs, and we'll swab the interiors, exteriors of the greenhouse, on different perimeters of the greenhouse, so that we can help to further narrow down, because the pesticide thing is a huge issue, because the FIFRA, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, Rodenticide Act, it's the foundation at which, we are in the world are protected from the exposure of a lot of these pesticides. And it's really stipulated strongly on when you can spray, what can spray, how you can spray, under what conditions, when conditions, but those things aren't followed, and so therefore kind of, when you drive down California, you see people just midday bombing, kind of carpet dusting out of planes or helicopters. They're doing so in full willful disregard to these regulations.
There are no guidelines for cannabis, right? There are no guidelines for cannabis.
No, I'm talking about them spraying ag crops, though, because now their ag sprays are going to drift and affect a cannabis farm. And so now that the cannabis farm gets hit and fails a batch of this really high-priced commodity crop that's now legal, now they have a precedent for holding accountable the farms, because farmers have crop insurance, not if they lose their crop because they fucked up. It's if in case their practices overspray and drift, and now they get held liable and have to basically get sued, and money basically is there from crop insurance to, so it's, I don't know.
The West is going to prevent overspray, though, from causing liability, especially in agricultural areas where it's a tradition, or agricultural spraying predates cannabis. So that's unfortunate, but what we're going to see is in the cannabis farms that choose to grow in those areas that unfortunately have that overspray, we're just going to have to develop SOPs in the extraction lab to scavenge those sides out.
No, but and I'm sorry to keep talking. Have you all been following the crop protection services issue in Carpinteria with the avocado farmers?
Yep.
Yes. So this is revolutionary, and this, I think, proves the point too, Mike, with kind of just cannabis changing ag, because now that so in avocado country, most avocado farmers don't spray their own pesticides. They hire Crop Protection Services, the biggest retailer wholesaler of fucking ag chemicals, who also has a department and division that goes out and sprays the pesticides for a yearly fee. So Crop Protection Services, as a result of cannabis now being planted all around Carpinteria, where in so many areas of Santa Barbara County where the avocados are, they now are scared shitless of getting sued and held liable for their spraying practices. So they just pulled out of every contract with every avocado farm to not spray pesticides this year as a result of like, the potential of being held liable. So now, instead of them just pulling up their like blasters in the midday without care of who's living in their environment or how their overspray is going to affect people, the way they used to get a blast and then drive home, now they're not doing it. So now if the avocado farmers want to spray their own pesticides, they spray them, and now they're the ones that are going to be held liable. So now I feel like this plant is this, beacon of progress being planted.
Well, hopefully it's, rather than spraying the dangerous pesticides that aren't approved for cannabis, they're going to start spraying the avocado plants with more beneficial, beneficial insects, beneficial microbacteria. A lot of those are going to be able to treat the same symptoms, just have less latency time and less hazard in the community.
And that's cannabis forcing progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. So, and that's great, right? Same. What I've seen in a lot of wheat farmers, corn farmers, and soybean farmers are now rotating hemp in. Because they think they're going to get that extra bonus, little bit more growing hemp than wheat or corn or soybeans, especially with this trade war going on. But that, I think the bigger benefit is growing polycultures, and then being able to rotate your paddocks, rotate your fields with multiple crops, and incorporate hemp's benefit for its herbicides, so you don't have to use those herbicides.
Yes, sir.
And Alex, do you test for no pest strips? What is that? Dichlorovinate?
Oh yeah. Oh no, we've seen people fail for putting up the dichlorovos like little insecticide traps, because you could get the sticky traps, which are chill, or you could get the ones that actually off-gas pesticide, and dichlorovos is a DDVP. Dichlorovos is a Category 1 pesticide, right. And also dichlorovos breaks down into nalid, nalid breaks down nalid, which is an organophosphate, which is
because I don't know that many people that use poison bombs indoors under lights, but those fucking no pest strips. I know hundreds of people that.
Well, it's the same thing. Yeah, it's the same thing, because it's basically because in areas where we see those no pest strips that are basically gassing dichlorovos. I mean, it's more or less the same thing, just a different way of bombing, right? Because they'll spread all the room.
Aren't pyrethrum bombs used to deal with sick infested rooms?
Oh yeah. Pie bombs, the bifenthrin bombs, chlorphenapyr bombs, chlorpyrifos bombs. We see all of them used, and it's been really big practice in California, before the testing regs were in place. For what it's worth, though, pyrethrin and bifenthrin, we see kind of, I guess, less. They seem to break down quicker over time. But a lot of these other compounds, like the piperonal butoxide, which is accompanying the pyrethrins, that's similar to the chlorpyrifos and chlorphenapyr, seems to stay persistent. And some of the only ways to get it out once you've been just historically bombing is to rip down your drywall, to rebuild the whole room, to break out because what happens is the lights turn off. The humidity spikes in the time where the dehumidifier is trying to catch up and bring the humidity down, and essentially it just sweats from the walls and from the environment, the ceilings, these pesticides out in the humid air, and then it just gets circulated and blown around through the humidity ventilation systems in the HVAC and the DU, and then you got essentially sticky residue of these pesticides spread through every area of the space. And and the thing is it happens the same with those no strip, no pest strips with nalid. Depending on how many of them you have spread across your room, it just, this slow gassing or this one-time bombing, it just starts to build persistence in the space.
Well, the whole notion about using pyrethrum, though, is that pyrethrum actually is not stable and will break down with time. So pyrethrum itself is an extract from a chrysanthemum daisy, right? That is actually a natural insecticide. Now, you have to distinguish that from pyrethroids, which are kind of like, there's opiate and opioids. So the pyrethroids are all synthetic analogs, and those are all the active ingredients that you're talking about, which, are not regulated for use in cannabis. 100%. But pyrethrum itself is a naturally occurring, basically extract that has mostly insecticidal activity, right?
Yeah, when you can get pyganic and like an organic evergreen version, which are just chrysanthemum extracts. But
paper which shows that cannabis can produce erythrine.
No, you know what? I have to say, I think there was a very premature, badly, there was a paper that kind of put out about pyrethrins. It was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, but there was a pretty recent paper over the last few years, but there was some faulty information that was generated by a lab or two around these, because in the mass spectrum, like you can pretty easily, if you don't validate your run, you can misidentify pyrethrin or these pyrethrin peaks or molecular kind of weights, whatever. I'm less kind of scientist, more kind of on kind of front end, so I'm not foundational in a lot of science, but essentially combined, there was a lot of false positives.
DNA paper, and the plant had the materials to produce erythrine.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I do know that because I know that the lab was publishing data around it, and I know as a result there was a genetic testing company that published it. I would personally want to see a lot more reproducible data to demonstrate that, because from what I know, so much of that was false positives from the lab.
It was only one variety of cannabis. They said none of the other ones did it.
Well, that'd be interesting if there was a certain specific plant or chemovar that had that property. That seems very interesting.
I'd tell everybody what it was, but everybody out there will immediately get it since they're warned off of the no pest strips now.
Totally.
And you've already patented that, right?
Oh, that's patented. Hey, Alec.
It's called Sam's plant.
I am definitely no longer going to be hitting my Andean Cusco chocolate that was left on my pillow in Colombia when I was there recently.
Well, dude, test it. Send it.
Cadmium?
Dude, let me test it.
I'll send it your way.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, because
Don't believe it, Marcus. He just wants to eat it.
It's real small. It's Cusco chocolate.
Well, and it's not to denigrate kind of, I love a lot of Andean medicines, but to understand this topic of cacao and this whole phytoremediation of cadmium, it's really blown my mind around these various aspects. And just like the whole thing with Juul and testing dimetazide when I was puffing, once and you see the results in front of you, you then have a choice, to keep puffing it or to keep eating that cacao, or to find a cleaner source. And I think that's one of the most magical things about kind of, what analytical chemistry is bringing to the, science of cannabis. It's really helping to kind of bring these things to the surface that are unknown invisibles, and then giving us the opportunity to choose.
100%. No, it's a wonderful thing. I'm glad you were able to make it in, because it sure was a lot of analytical and lab talk before you came in. And of course, since you've come in as well, it's been the real. And I wanted to mention to you guys, through Zoom, I can record this. So I record it like in a video format. It also streams to YouTube and gets saved, but then it also creates a audio file. So I've started to post at Buzzsprout, and I'll post the link in Hashchurch. It's basically buzzsprout.com / and then the code for all the Hashchurch will be 552196, and I'll post that in I'll post it in the comments section of all the Hash Churches from now on that are Zoom, and I'll also post it in the Hash Church forum on Facebook, just so people, some people have been asking me for years to make Hash Church into a podcast, so there you have it. It is a podcast. And today it was a darn good one, let me tell you. I say we still got 22 minutes to rock till noon. I sort of had till noon put aside, so let's continue our conversation. Yeah, I haven't been seeing too many people hitting bong reps. I feel like I've been hitting mine pretty tough here, but maybe it's...
I have, sir.
I'm smoking, rolling.
I have, sir.
Well, thanks for doing this, Mark. It's good to get together with everybody again. It's good to talk to Alec and see Etienne again. And I think Etienne just celebrated a big milestone in his life, right?
A couple.
Yeah, a few,
Yeah.
right? More than one.
He just banged out a couple in the last like 3 months.
But thanks for putting this back together, man. This is good.
Yes, thank you so much, Marcus. I must say it's nice to be back on and to see everybody, as well as to learn. I love learning. I love listening and hearing, from everyone. I just it's,
What are you, the big 50 now?
yeah. I became 50, and I got married in Alaska. So
I've been with my wife for 50 years.
So half a century. So I'm in the half century club and looking forward to the next one. So
did you hear what he said, Etienne?
No,
he's been with his wife for 50 years.
Wow.
Congratulations there. Wow, Sam, many blessings there. I hope to reach that milestone myself with my beautiful wife.
Do the math.
I'll tell you, Sam, the picture you have hanging near your bathroom in your kitchen there of like you and your friends and you and Diana are in the picture. I can't remember exactly. It looks like an album cover or something. That's definitely the front page of your book, because that is the most unbelievable. It looks like it's like a Hollywood thing. Like it doesn't even look real.
I've got a much cuter one when I was about 9 months old, naked on a bear rug.
No, you got to bury that in the book deep. You can't be putting that on the front cover, Sam. Come on. You get.
Hey, Mark, you want to answer this last question here?
Which one?
Is it possible to carboxylate THC distillate?
Converting it back into THCA. Yeah, right. He would very much like you to ask that question.
Okay. So who asked that question?
Well, that question, they'd probably tell me if I asked. Tell us who answered.
Okay. So it's possible, but it takes a whole lot of energy, because you've basically, THCA again has got higher energy than THC, and so when it decarboxylates, it goes downhill, kind of like a roller coaster. And so you need to put a lot of energy back in. And when you lose the carboxylic acid in THCA, that's a decarboxylation. To carboxylate it, it's a very old chemical reaction called the Kolbe-Schmidt reaction. And the Kolbe-Schmidt reaction it's a way to make salicylic acid from phenol. So it's a way of carboxylating phenol to make salicylic acid. And you could apply that to make THCA, but it would probably tear up the rest of the molecule, because that reaction is done at ungodly high pressure, I think in molten sodium or some shit like that. So middle of the sun kind of chemistry.
So you're saying it's going to destroy the terps?
It's going to destroy everything, including probably the person doing it, But someone reported
the person doing it.
Yeah, someone reported the use of a reagent called MNNP, which is magnesium monoterephthalate, to do the oxidation of THC to make THCA. They only did a few milligrams in the paper. They just showed that it could be done. And I think isolated the peak in the GC and said, look, we can do this.
Well, that was Blue Ford Focus who asked that question, and he just said, this is so much better than asking on Reddit.
Yeah, well, he's getting the poop. So yeah, probably not. And once you decarboxylate, it's a downhill thermodynamic reaction. You lose CO2, and that CO2 needs a whole lot of energy to go back and be the cannabinoid acid again. And it just, yeah.
Idea what the yield is?
Oh, it would. Again, so when they used to make industrially salicylic acid you could actually isolate from the bark of willow tree, I think is where they used to get it from. But you can make it industrially in a Kolbe-Schmidt reaction. Kolbe is spelled Kolbe. Kolbe-Schmidt. Man, these are some badass German chemists for, a little after turn of the century that were fucking taking molten sodium and doing all kinds of synthesis with it. These motherfuckers, man, it just, this is the foundation of chemistry that exists out there. There are ways. So to answer the question, yes, you can do it. I think it would tear up the rest of the molecule, and I think it would never be economically viable to do so. So, but interesting question nonetheless.
It's inspired me actually, and I just mentioned it to the YouTube chat room that I think a really good episode would be, you know, a question and answer. Like, listen, this is going to be the panel this week. We're specifically only going to be answering your questions, maybe even over the course of a week or two, you know, bring in 500 different questions and pick like 20 or 30 or 40 or whatever it is we have time to answer. I think that would be pretty killer. You know,
we could answer 5 questions every time we do a hash church.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. And I, you know, just today being the last half an hour, it made sense to just be like, they've got lots of questions. One thing I will say about the chat, the hash church chat room is that they're very engaged with what's going on for the most part. The odd time someone gets a stick up their ass and they try to like hijack the entire conversation, but they are pretty damn engaged in the conversation, which I guess is part of that little bit of magic that we have.
Why would they be watching if they were, you know?
Well, you'd be surprised, man. I go into like, you know, okay, for a perfect example, couch tour. Holy smokes. You get to go to the real shows, so you probably don't have to do couch tour, Mark. But let me tell you.
I'm on couch tour now because Fish is out in Denver.
Caliber of people in the chat room, let's just say, are not 90 micron.
For the rest of us laymen, what are you talking about?
I'm just talking about, sometimes Fish does they do their tour video live streamed. And so they have a video stream. Sometimes it's on Ustream or whatever. And then they have a chat room, just like us, just like here. And so I'll go into the chat room thinking, man, I bet you there's some good people in there. And I'm just like, holy shit. Like, it's like troll central in there. Like, you don't even want to go in there for half a second. Makes me sick.
Everything here is really engaged and really thoughtful. There's a lot of crazy questions in here. I'm just going through trying to find, there's a few that are really fascinating around testing. You know, one of the ones actually I see on here that real quick I think would be great to hit is pesticides through, why do pesticides kind of concentrate more with the essential oils and the resin glands than kind of on the biomass or plant material? Because we see that trend very specifically. Like if you have pesticides, fungicides, anything like that on the plant, and if you do fresh frozen extraction, live resin extraction on it, and then in the process of further kind of purifying and kind of mining the diamonds, where then the terpenes separate up to the top, you know, in the terpene layer, like if you test the crystalline THCA that's created from that process, you know, it's 96, 97+% THCA. The remaining bits are, you know, presence of kind of terpenes, what have you. But you see in the terpenes, the terpene layer is where what fractions the pesticides with it. So we see most all of the pesticides or whatever fungicide contamination that's in the material, we see all of that migrate with the terpenes.
Is that because the terpenes are a solvent?
That's correct.
That's kind of that was kind of
hydrophobic solvent, and most of those are hydrophobic molecules. A lot of them delivered by suspension in water. They're not very water soluble, so they want to be in a hydrophobic environment. So yeah, it totally makes sense.
Cool.
Sorry, I'm bummed, right? Wouldn't it be great if the pest? Well, you know, that said, there are water soluble pesticides that will stay in the water and not go into the oil. But unfortunately, most of these, you know, insecticides and microbutanil, a lot of these things are very hydrophobic and will concentrate in the oil.
You guys missed it. The second I mentioned that we had a good chat room, a troll came in and was like, "You guys need to stop smoking weed and get your lives together."
Oh, that's what I was missing. My life. Oh gosh.
Etienne, what the heck?
Well, if he would just tell me exactly what I should do, when I should do it, and how I should do it, I'll follow his rules, see how it works out.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to finish it with a bong rip. We got 12 minutes left before it's noon. I got all these tasty bootlegs in my DAT recorder from I bought this in 1995 in Missoula, Montana.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
And I just decided, you know what? I'm going to become a taper. I should be a fucking taper. 95. I'd been to quite a few shows already, and I had a hard time acquiring them. And I was
Dead shows or fish shows?
How did you find that in Missoula?
How did I know, right? How did I what, Mark?
I was just, you said you'd been to a bunch of shows, dead shows or fish shows?
No, it was fish shows. It was nice.
Okay.
And I think, to be honest, Jerry had passed already by this point.
Yeah, okay.
Before I saw Fish for the first time in '93, but yeah, I just have all these old shows from, like, you know, here's a David Grisman that I taped, you know, like.
All of the ones I have, Marcus, are taped in either the Milky Way or the Paradiso.
Oh, I know, Sam. Yours are amazing. This is the Missoula, Montana show. This was the first recording I ever did on this DAT.
Oh, wow. That's an incredible show.
Oh, dude.
Right? There's tracks from that show that are on the a live one, their live release. I think the tweezer from that night might be the tweezer.
No, that was from Bangor, Maine. I was at that show.
You were at that. See, look at that. See, you know that.
I was in '94 in Bangor, Maine, and I took too many psychedelics at that show, in fact. I thought it was just like, okay, the guy's like, do you want to eat some mushrooms? I'm like, I would love to eat some mushrooms. He's like, they're pretty strong. I'm like, well, just give me a gram. So I eat a gram of these mushrooms. Well, apparently pretty strong. Okay, so I'm standing in line to get into this concert. And the sound of everyone talking slowly morphs into mechanical, like crazy, like spaceship sounds of like a giant spaceship gearing up to take off. It was totally blowing my mind. At that point, I thought, this shit must have been dipped in a much stronger psychedelic, because like no gram of mushrooms could get me this high. I've eaten enough 5-gram doses to know this is going to be heavy. So I'm getting high. The lineup's getting closer and closer. As we get to the door, I realize they are searching people harshly. Okay, there's like all these cops lined up against the wall, and they're patting people down. And I'm like, holy shit, like I have a lot of stuff. So I start stuffing everything into my socks. And I don't really realize it, but I basically stuff my bag of weed into my sock, and it gets caught up on my pant leg. So it's really just sticking out of my pant leg. And I'm super high. I go up there. They pat me down and don't see this plastic bag apparently sticking out of my pant leg. And then I walk by this like long row. At this point, I'm like, I'm in a psychedelic state. I can't even exactly tell. Like everything's different than it should be. And these cops are all just looking at me with the most serious look. And man, I walked past them about 20 feet and looked down and realized the bag was hanging out. And it was the beginning of a very intense show. And that 29 or 31 minute long tweezer, mind numbing, let me tell you.
Yeah, well, I was hassled going into the Palace Theater on my birthday. This would have been December 29th, 1992. And I just got back from Colorado, and we were growing skunk #1. So I had a nice fresh bag of skunk #1 in my pocket and got it taken away going into the show that night. It really just bummed me out because it's just such good weed. Well, on the way out of the show, we grabbed the bag out of the garbage can where they made me throw the weed, and we got a bunch of shit that was confiscated at the door that night and ran around the back of the theater. And we're back there, Marcus, and Paige walks out. Paige from the band walks down the stairs, and we're all down there going through our, what we got, one man gathers what another man spills. So we got like a bowl, we got a bag of mushrooms, got everything that was confiscated at the door that night. We got, because we grabbed the trash going out of the front of the theater. It was so awesome. And to dial that up to this year, I was going to see Fish at, we were going in with my family at Meriwether Post Pavilion. And the young kid told me to empty my pockets. And, I pulled into my pocket, and I had, a couple pre-rolls, inside a raw, the raw cone cardboard thing that they have, a couple of I just had one of those with like 2 J's in it. And he pointed to the trash can, and he's like, in the trash. I'm like, are you kidding me? And he's like, in the trash. And he had some other older dude behind him with a walkie-talkie, and I wasn't going to be held down for two joints walking into a fish show. So we threw it in the trash, and then my son was just in on the other side, and he's like, Dad, you got, he's like, no, I got him taken away. He's like, Dad, what the fuck, man? It's like, so we went to the show, and on the way out of the show, sure enough, we walked through the same exit. There on the garbage can is the thing. We grabbed that shit and fucking took off with it.
Yeah,
right there in the garbage can.
You're in the show, hey? Bastard.
Yeah.
If you work a job where you're searching people on the way into a concert and you're not letting them take their weed or hash or cannabis products into said concert, you, my friend, are a dick.
Well, and especially in a place like, you know, where, you know, cannabis laws are changing. Everyone's got a vape pen these days. You figure, oh, this guy's just got 2 pre-rolled joints and a fucking raw, you know, thing, you know, let him go in, you know. It's like, no, they got to take it away. They feel like they're doing their job. Yeah. But the cool thing is I went back out through the thing, grabbed them, and there they were.
No, that's very cool. That's kind of like being told you can't smoke at a reggae show. Yep.
Yeah, what the fuck is that, right?
That's not how it works. We
I
absolutely.
went to a pop festival in England. It was called the Reading Pop Festival in 1971. And it was expensive. I forget what it was, you know, $20 or $30 at the time to go for a couple day festival. And then I noticed what they were doing is they were taking everybody's ticket, tearing it in half, giving half to the person, the other half they were throwing in the trash. So when nobody was looking, I took about 1,000 of them out of the trash, and I just started handing them out to everybody that didn't have tickets.
That's awesome. Johnny Ticket Seed.
There's an OG
Johnny concert ticket. Call him Miracle.
Music trash can be hot stuff.
That's some serious miracles distribution.
Well, think about it. Most people like can say like, I gave a miracle away. Like I personally have an 18-person miracle story, but Sam's got like, well, I gave away like, I don't know, it was like 800 miracles or something. That's awesome. Well played, Sam. Well played.
I need a miracle every day.
Yeah. Ba-ba-da-ba-bump. I had something I was going to say, but I kind of spaced it. It definitely we were talking. Oh, I did listen to the Hash Church song the other day. I listened to it the other day. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, I have to. Marcus, you know what I had to do is like update the lyrics, right?
Yeah.
You know? Well, then when I go through it, I sang it the other day. I was like, it made me think about Horatio and Tony and Nikki, you know, all the people that we used to be on, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Todd, yeah.
I haven't seen Horatio literally since he came. No, one time I bumped into Horatio.
Right.
I have. Otherwise, he's like on the down low.
Right. Now, what about Indra? Have you heard from him at all?
From who? Indra?
Indra, John, yeah.
Yeah. I talked to Indra. Yep. No, I have. I haven't talked to him in the last maybe couple weeks, but I talk to him more often than not, for sure.
Right. So, how is his extraction business going, or is there anything to report that you can report on? Or
well, it's a lot of work for sure, but he's definitely got something really quite amazing there as well. So we're hoping on getting it going in a way that can even be more amazing. So he's definitely, there's no doubt about, what he said in the early days, that he had created this fairly special thing. It's a pretty special thing. Like it's definitely producing product in the seed oil and protein world for us that we're quite happy about. It's just a matter of R&D at this point. Yeah, Indra will be back on again, I'm sure.
And what about Tony? What's the latest on him? Do you know?
I still am in a company with him, but as far as I've heard, I really don't know. Like I heard he won a Cannabis Cup recently. I know that UCAN's still rocking and rolling. I'm sure he's probably down in California running his labs.
Well, if you go to UCAN's site, though, I don't think he's part of the team anymore. It sounds like he's no longer with UCAN. Is that right?
Oh shit, I don't know. I mean,
yeah, I was wondering about Tony the other day, and I went to UCAN's site and I see it talks about Ernie and some of the other folks, but it doesn't. I don't think Tony's mentioned. And
it's not.
He's not legally part of UCAN anymore. But what he is he still has some shares in some of the companies that he needs to. He's promised he was going to sell back, but it hasn't happened yet.
Right. Ooh, well, shares. We all know how that plays out. I remember at one point UCAN had $11 shares, and then I checked the other day, it was 49 cents. That's got to be a wicked hit.
Yeah, it's just tough to play that game. I mean, and I don't know, like if you look at some of these other bigger players like the multinationals now, the canopies and whatnot, I mean, what's going to ultimately happen in that, especially with the FDA's position now on CBD, So a lot of huge Canadian companies are scooping up licenses left and right here in the States. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes.
More people made more money selling shares of their companies, pump them up and dump them, than selling marijuana.
It's true. Massive, insane amounts of wealth have been produced in that very fraud, I guess you could call it.
Kind of. I mean, it's a trip to me because there's so many. I mean, I feel like just in the cannabis, in the leadership of the cannabis community in each of the spaces, each of the states, there lies this kind of, this 2 degree of Kevin Bacon kind of, of the connection and interconnection, I think, of a lot of the leaders in the community, and I think there's massive strength in kind of the solidarity among that community. Cannabis has so long been based on trust and respect and kind of integrity in your word, kind of, hustling weed, kind of somebody could rip you off, to rob you. There's this code of conduct, I think, that's really kind of fallen off, in this invasion effort of capitalism into cannabis. And, I really pray and hope, on this task church today that, we as a community can kind of come together more and less see, each other in ways as competition, and kind of more, really, because I think the real competitors haven't came in yet, obviously, and they're waiting for the infighting and all the failures, because the lack of capital or the, kind of the vulture fund kind of effort to come and just take over and kind of, transform these good ideas and good people's business into, these pumping up shit efforts to kind of just raise money and capital with quick exit strategies. But, I feel like, us understanding that there's more kind of culture and richness in our community than they could ever bring money in to take over. And as long as we can, gather and organize in that way and, kind of keep that code of conduct on that high level of integrity, then I think we can also, in a way, all boats rise with the tide, and we can come up while, they make their efforts. But I think a lot of those efforts are going to fall short and going to fail, deploying that much capital to scale cannabis businesses across so many states and so many places. I mean, it's so hard to grow fire herb and to do so with hubris, thinking you're just going to monocrop it bigger than you've ever gone without even ever having to go through the understanding and issues of all the pests and all the, it's a futile effort. And I think, again, ultimately the plants control us, and, the people with integrity that have taken care of it will ultimately come up as long as we, are able to stay resilient.
And that said, I want to offer universal shares in my company, Universal Cannabis.
What?
I'm selling them for a penny each, and I promise everybody they'll go up to $1 million each.
Dude, you just sold 8 billion shares.
Dude, I'm in.
I got a quarter right here.
Damn, that's 25 mil, Mark.
I got an eighth. Oh wait.
No, I mean, history doesn't not only repeat itself, history rhymes, right? Think about the end of alcohol prohibition, the eve of the end of alcohol prohibition in the U.S., right? And when they realized that prohibition wasn't going to work anymore, and yeah, it became a regulated, medicinal, and all that bullshit. But ultimately, look what it washed up to now. You know, yeah, there's Budweiser and there's these huge manufacturers of all this swill, crappy product, but there's this great, incredible craft beer industry and craft distiller industry that will come along with cannabis. I think as long as there's a consumer for it, and as long as there's enthusiasts like us and the people who watch Hash Church, I mean, certainly, like, yeah, just think of it like tomatoes, right? You can grow your own tomatoes, but you can go to the place and buy tomatoes, and that place is regulated by the Department of Health, and it's got to be ISO certified, blah, 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 whatever. I mean, ultimately, that's where we're going. It's going to be unregulated completely. It's going to be like a craft beer industry for the connoisseurs. There will always be good, high-quality artisan cannabis and cannabis products available, just like there are really heady beers. And it'll be good to be like sort of geographically specific to those areas, just like the heady beers from Pacific Northwest and Colorado and the ones in Virginia and elsewhere. I mean, it's a great analogy, and I think that's how things are going to roll out.
Well, I 100% agree there, Mark. I really appreciate I so much am grateful to be part of this and just the level of thought and understanding among all of the Hash Church elders. I'm really grateful to even be part of this conversation. But, you know, just one thought on that, you know, I've been wrestling with this quite a bit, you know, with especially this whole hemp movement and the conversation of make hemp great again, you know, and the conversion of all these monocrop kind of, you know, super contaminated spaces, you know, now growing kind of CBD for human consumption. Ultimately, that could be found over the counter, you know, by a, you know, kind of pediatric epilepsy patient. You know, it's like there's, you know, and obviously what I'm about to say too, I say so fully mindful that I have a vested interest in a testing laboratory, but where I'm coming from and speaking from is, you know, a passionate servant to this plant and seeing, you know, the botany of desire, this whole, you know, coevolution that's taking place, you know, from us cultivating this plant and this plant ultimately cultivating us. You know, I think a great purpose of this plant is really, you know, again, this bioaccumulation story. It's to help bring to the surface, you know, these invisible unknowns that, you know, are important for us to restore human health and wellness, you know, which cannabis is such a part of, but food is even bigger a part of. You know, it's like
Alex, what percentage of the food grown in America, what percentage of the people that eat the food eat organic food?
Sure, but
more than 10%?
I understand that, and I 100% agree. But does that mean that those people aren't being poisoned? You know, when there's this whole
No, I think they are being poisoned. But my question is, I think that we are a small market.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. No, I agree. But we have the chance with this plant co-evolving us to radically affect and disrupt agriculture to begin a process to make food medicine again. You know, whereas
by the way,
medicine
cannabis does not lead me to organic living and living soil and biodynamic organic growing. I was a farmer like that before I grew cannabis.
Sure, but just follow me though on this thought, you know, because this is the big kind of, you know, thought I've been working on and in my mind and reconciling just, you know, in the service I'm working on on behalf of this plant now. You know, I feel like this plant's a storyteller, you know, and through these regulations we've put on it, it's telling the story. It's a great story about what's happened, the legacy of what's happened to land, legacy of what's happened to our food system, you know, the legacy of like helping to, you know, with all these lawsuits in effect right now around Monsanto, like 12,000 lawsuits around glyphosate creating cancer in people's life. You know, there's this moment of awakening that's taking place and cannabis can help with it, you know, because there's this Ayurvedic quote, like when diet is in order, medicine is of no need. When diet is out of order, medicine is of no use. So no matter how much this medicinal plant cannabis can help heal our body and our life and our cancer if we don't first change our diet and radically remove the chemicals and the poisons that are destroying our microbiome, that are creating the systemic inflammation, that's creating all the illness, then, what are we doing on behalf of this plant? There's all this place to innovate and make money. And what else is it? It's to help change the world, and part of that is through the transparency of what now, because cannabis is the first crop that's ever been regulated on this level. Every other ag crop has been fully deregulated. Everything has been so deregulated to the point where our entire food system is compromised and is poisoning us. It's poisoning our children, it's poisoning our lives. And then the people that are making the pesticides are the same people selling the medicines through the pharmacy, Bayer, that are then kind of like healing the ill, which is just this like people being farmed. Like from the poisons in the food to the like going to the doctor and taking the pharmacy that's then making them sicker. And it's an endless cycle. And I feel like with cannabis, we're disrupting that. We bring this to the surface. It's helping to set an example of food and change. But and here's my last point. And this is the biggest thing I was actually just trying to say. It's like, I think we have to have this eternal vigilance, as leadership and elders in the cannabis community, to uphold this minimum quality standard that have been put in place, so that we can kind of not only have a barrier of entry for like, the 1,000 million acres in the Midwest that, the mega farms with the super tractors are harvesting all the GMO wheat. It's like for them to just be able to shift and grow CBD that then ultimately is going to go to children or autistic people and patients or any other person that's looking for cannabis to help them. It's like, if we don't uphold this minimum level of quality and set the example for national conversations around legalization and what anybody has to meet if they want to participate in the drug market of selling medicinal cannabis to people and patients through, over by big box stores and Whole Foods. It's like, if we don't uphold and set the example, Canada went even stricter than California, but there's this integrity, I think, with the testing model that's helping to not only hold any and everybody accountable that wants to come in and take their piece of cannabis, but it's also helping to create the path for this radical revolution of agriculture and in small farming, kind of, back to, and that's the rant, and I apologize, but I just wanted
to have a lot more faith in common sense and people's goodness than I do. I think people are incredibly clumsy and stupid.
Don't lose the hope, bro.
Don't lose the hope. No, I appreciate the perspective for sure. I need to do a few things quick because we're over the 12 o'clock thing and I got to go here soon. But I needed to ask Sam in regards to purchasing screen out of the UK. Do you remember which one the 43T was in micron?
Yeah, 43s were very small,
like
the whole size.
Like 40, 50 micron or something, or more like 70?
I don't remember if it was the thread measurement per centimeter or inch, or if the person to ask is Rob, because when he did hashish, he wrote all that shit down. And me, all I did, I remembered that a 77 is what you wanted for collecting resin, and a 43 is what you put on top of when you wanted to get rid of everything that was too small to be good.
Right, so it was probably a 70 micron. 43 is 70, and then the 77 is like 150 or 160 micron.
It also makes a difference whether it's an S or a T or whatever. That has to do with the thickness of the thread.
Yeah, the thread diameter, exactly. And that determines the ratio of hole versus the ratio of screen on the surface area.
Yeah. Right.
Mark, I believe it's lines LPI, lines per inch. So the greater number, the greater threads per either inch.
They don't use inches over here in Europe.
Yeah, no, it's different. We have lines per inch and mesh are the same. LPI and mesh are the same, but the T's and the S's, the 43s and the 77s from the UK is some other rando super like, huh?
Also what they use in Switzerland and the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
It's I used to buy Swiss Nibolt and Swiss Polymon. Those are the ones that I used to use. And I used to use 77, either an S or a T, and 43s.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to get that off. Then I also wanted to say a shout out and maybe a bong rip, because this will probably be the last thing I say today, to one of our longtime, like since the beginning of Hash Church, he was there in the chat room. He went by A Pot Smoker, and I guess he passed away recently. So he's we thought we would give him a nice little send off. Thanks for being a part of the Hash Church community, bro. Sorry to see you go, but I guess we all have an expiry date, so let's puff a little bowl for A Pot Smoker. R.I.P. A Pot Smoker. Perfect. Did it.
Is there a better, does it sound better on the Zoom as opposed to the other one? Is there like a delay?
Great, man.
It'll work.
I'm going to mute my mic.
He's gone, right? Ready to drink it, caught on the wheel. You know better, but I know him. Like I told you, what I said. Steal your face right off your head. There it is. Now he's gone. He's gone. He's like I see in the morning, rolling down the track. He's gone. He's gone. Nothing's gonna bring him back. He's gone.
Thanks so much, Mark. That was the best ending to a great Hash Church. Thanks, everybody. Peace out.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you.
Ciao.